everybody. Just over the Christmas period, I had a really good hangout with Angel. Well, on the phone, that is. He was showing us masses of stuff. He seems to have moved on his ideas about the pyramids a little bit. And then we said that we would actually have a hangout. So this is what this is about. But we did it on Facebook, which means that you don't hear me talking because the microphone only goes his way. I wanted to be able to hear Angel. So you don't hear me in this hangout, but I am talking to him. He could hear me. So I might ask a question and then he answers a little bit or something. But I had this really brilliant talk with him the other day, and now we've put it on a video. And obviously we had Peanuts as well. That's his little dog. And anyway, I hope you really enjoy this hangout. It's not a 5 minute, it is nearly 3 hours long, but it was a great conversation. So thanks very much, Angel. Mwah! And thank you, chat room, for listening. Great hangout. Mwah! Oh yeah, it's all about the pyramids in Egypt.
Well, I'd have to say it really stems back to 9/11. It really started me down a rabbit hole of different things. It was the reality in 2007. I saw a movie by Jason Burmis, which was put out by InfoWars, called 9/11 Loose Change Part 2. And in there, I saw something which really made me whip my head and think twice. It was a video I had seen on broadcast TV dozens of times where they show Tower 1 falling, Tower 2 falling, and then they put Tower 7 next to the Sands Hotel, I think it is, and they show them both falling next to each other. And I always thought that they were trying to compare the first two structures falling compared to those other two structures falling, at least on the broadcast TV. And it wasn't until 2007 that I realized a third building fell on September 11th, something it took me 7 years to figure out. And it wasn't until I actually realized that that particular video clip was comparing building 7 to the other building. And building 7 you can clearly see as a controlled demolition. Even the fact that Silverstein said he pulled it, they pulled the fire department out of it because they had such a loss of life and blah, blah, blah. And that really opened my eyes to the fact that the news was blatantly lying, covering up, however you want to word it. Gave me the rabbit hole into Operation Mockingbird, things like that. And I wanted to attack something that I'm not going to say I'm an expert on, but wasn't really touched. And I knew ever since high school that the stories they tell of the pyramid structure, that the one that I like to call the pyramid structure, didn't make a lot of sense. And one thing they love to say is that in the Queen's Chamber, what they like to call the Queen's Chamber, which is the structure, I'm trying to look for it. Here, I'll use this image. This structure right here, and this is not a, may I ask, do we keep dropping out? Because you keep, perfect, and I'm going to keep going. There's a clear watermark around the edge of the room, and if I can find a picture of it, which would be great to think, because picture's worth a million words, you can clearly see a watermark around the edge of the room. It goes completely around it, and of course I can't find it right now because I want to, and it's eluding me. Here we go. You can clearly see at about hip level a watermark around the room, and that coincides right with the bottom of the tail in the niche in the wall, like they call the niche in the wall. And they like to say it's people putting their hands on there, and that makes no sense that people would consistently over the ages put their hands in the exact same spot to cause this. And, hence it wasn't oils from people's hands. But what I focused on, what I was focusing on, is the physical structure itself, the containment vessel that we like to call the Great Giza Pyramid. I spent a lot of time focusing on things like you're looking at on the screen right there, where you can see that this was designed, that this tail right here is fabricated. It doesn't exist. Is my mouse show? Yeah, my mouse is showing up. That part is fabricated. That's the other thing, is many of the drawings, sketches, like to embellish areas. Again, this would be great if I had examples of it ready to go, but where there's drawings, sometimes they like to embellish certain things and add features that physically don't exist, or that they want to exist because it goes to the tomb dogma. But when you look at pictures, luckily, there are pictures such as this one that you're looking at right now, where as time has gone on, they've modified this structure. And I can understand, because they want to bring tourists through there, that they don't want a funnel. So grandma, when she's climbing up there, slides down the grand gallery and sues the heck out of them for sliding down there. But when they modified it, they did it all under the premise of that this was originally they said it was a tomb for the king to reside in. And then they said, oh, well, yeah, the kings were buried in the valley of the kings. And this was really a monument and effigy to the pharaohs of the time, or kings of the time, or whatever you want to refer to. But all of this, I really never, ever felt comfortable with any of their answers, because it just didn't make sense. And because they keep changing it over time to fit their story. I wanted to put blinders on and address this structure as just addressing the physical makeup of the structure. And all the pictures that you can see here, you are welcome to look at for yourself. I put them at photos.giza.ws or photos.greatgizapyramid.com, whichever one you like to put. And you can get to them and you can look at them, because I think when you actually put eyes on the structure in comparison to the stories that you've been told of the structure, that you will see that the stories don't hold water. But I do think the structure, ironically, ironically enough, was designed to hold water. And I can understand over time how fairly intelligent people, scholars of the day, would look at these structures. This one you're looking at is actually the one they like to call the third pyramid. I like to call it Building 7. I have my own reasons for that. But I call it Building 7, just how there were two towers in the third building. You notice that this one is half the height of the other two structures. And so was Building 7 half the height of Tower 1 and Tower 2. And I don't think that's ironic, because a little side trail here. I do think that the Trade Center towers, which were very unpopulated, were actually tapping energy and were piping it down into the electrical system of New York City through the power plant, which was located under Building 7, which ironically enough, even though Building 7 fell to the ground in an uncontrolled demolition, didn't damage that power plant at all. Even though it fell right down in its footprint nicely and smoothly, that power plant was untouched. Along with the fact that when you look into 9/11, they had a power outage the weekend before 9/11, which is when I think they decoupled the towers from the electrical grid in preparation for the fateful event which would happen on 9/11. Because if you hit the power grid with a shock to the system, you're going to blow a bunch of transformers and overload circuits. But if they pulled the why are you doing this right now today? If you pull the system off of it in a controlled fashion, then I am going to have to ask you to pause while I put him in another room.
What are you doing? You're in the middle of a broadcast and you're making noise.
Come on in the other room. Go eat food or something. Go. Be good. All right. I'm sorry. You can edit that out later. I do think the more I understand about static electricity and/or just the energies at higher altitude and how they are tappable. He came back into the room again. Well, you can. They are mountains. Well, I think the water that came into the system came from a tributary off of the Nile River, and I guess I could do this real quick. Will this work? It does. I'm not. I'm listening. Well, one thing which is very documentable is the coarseness of the layers, how all these layers across there as you're going up the system. On this particular structure, they are the bottom part you can see. Let's see, can I zoom in on this? There's probably a way to zoom in. There we go. You can see how the bottom like quarter of the structure there has a larger step than everything from right where that opening is, right there for the opening is, all the way up is at a different coarseness. And it's very visually evident. I don't have to fabricate it or try to make you see something that isn't there. It's very in your face. Now, the other two structures also have very varying of coarsenesses. And luckily, and you can get to this easily by going to surface.giza.ws or surface.greatgizapyramid.com. I have a image of a gentleman in the 1800s. Let me actually go to it the way I told you. surface.giza. Of course, it's hard to type with one hand because I'm holding the phone. .ws. And it comes up to this drawing, sketch, I should say, where a person, Gattenbrink or something like that, in the 1800s, 1840s or something like that, measured the elevation and depth of each of the courses. Now, he did this based on the average around the circumference of the structure. I think if we actually went crazy, you'll find that today, if we did it as somebody actually has, with a stereo drone or really 3D photography, you'll see that it's a lot more complicated even than what you see here. But whether or not you want to look at this is the trimmed down version, you can visually see that up here at the top, near the top of the structure, there you go, that they are shorter and not as deep between the, I guess I can put it like this. Each step, as you're going up, it measured the depth and the elevation of change. And as you go higher in the structure, they start to get smaller. Now, it's not just that they start to get smaller, they actually have a pattern that you can see, a sweeping pattern, where if I unzoom this somehow, can I make it all one page? Now, you can do this on your own. You can look at it. This one printed out is actually like 3 pages that make this, and I put it all together on one thing and put a piece of cardboard behind it to show in my whiteboard videos. But you can see a sweeping pattern that works its way up to the top of the structure. You can see the sweeping pattern. And when you really pay attention, certain of these steps, ironically enough, this one right here, that is the, what they like to call the 23rd level. That is the one that is at the exact same elevation as the top of the Queen's chamber. And I'd like to suggest too that it's not that way by mistake. That is the tallest step and deepest change. You can see right here how large of a jump it is. And I will suggest to you that that is to help quarantine the static electricity that to this very day is being collected on the surface of the structure. Now today, if you go to there, and you're not allowed to climb the structure anymore, but if you were to go there and try to climb the structure, that static electricity is now alleviated, so it doesn't build up, by the wooden antenna structure they have put on the top of the pyramid. And you notice that this one leg goes right to the corner, and I don't think that's by mistake. That's allow the static electricity, which would be riding on the surface of the structure, just like all static electricity does, to vent off into what I will refer to as the ether. You can call it the atmosphere, the general ambient air in the area. The structure itself, I will suggest, is acting like a large Van de Graaff generator. And here's the, we just looked at the other part of it. Here's the step as they have it today. You can see they put stairs in there and railings such that Granny won't slide down it. And they have steps and things that are all retrofitted into it to A, help tourism, and B, help perpetuate the tomb dogma. But I like to both model and work with the structure in as close as I can get it with my knowledge to the original configuration, because I'm not trying to model a tomb. I'm trying to model the pyramid, actually the entire plateau, because I fully feel that it works as a system. And we can get into how the system works shortly. But the other thing about you're not supposed to be in this room. Can you please pause a moment while I go give him a dog bone or something? Why? What? Why? Am I not showing you enough attention? Can you please pretend that I'm trying to do something that doesn't involve you right now? Please go in the other room. Go on. Go on. Your mom wants to hug you. She does. She wants to hug you. All right. So, and again, visualizing this is something that really is the best. Now, this, what you're looking at right there, a lot of people from the base of it looking up, they like to show you a funny looking, what they like to call a pyramidion. They shape it like that, and it's about 6 feet in diameter. Sorry, 6 feet, and maybe 8-9 feet tall. However, this right here at the top of the structure is 39 feet by 39 feet. Actually, I think it's 39 by 38 to be technical. And when you picture putting this 6-foot thing on top of there, it's going to take a little spot in the center there. It doesn't even fit. It's like if somebody gave you a Lego piece and said it fits into that spot there and it covers the hole. And you're like, well, it's just wrong. And in addition to that, this right here is a different color, which kind of draws attention to it. And it really shows that it was intentionally put there. And as time goes on, and as people really focus on Karl Monk and his The Code, this can be read kind of the same way you read Braille or Morse code or things of that nature. As long as there's a consistent pattern and it can be duplicated, it is communication. But we'll get into that. We'll get into that down the road. What I really want people to focus on is the fact that it's very large, practically 40 feet by 40 feet, a different color, and it's not a flat shape. It is not such that you can even visualize something being put to rest on top of it to sit. Now, this structure, which is the second of the second pyramid, this one you could maybe potentially envision that particular thing sitting on. But even this one is 9 feet by 9 feet. You can't tell it there because you're looking at such a large structure, but that one is 9 feet by 9 feet. Still something that there could have been something sitting on top of there. I don't believe so. But if one of the structures had something, this one would. You can also here see a little trail that goes around. If you were to kind of squeeze these together, like push them back into their original positions, you can see that there was a ring there. So maybe potentially some capstone may have been on there. But I don't really at this point feel that there was really any capstones. I think the structures sat as they were, because when you look at how they function as they sit, as they are today, and ignore the tomb dogma, then you see things are really as they were, as they are, not as they want you to see them. And this one right here, and I can show you pictures on the top of it, this is the only one that actually comes to a point. This is the one that really comes to the point. Now, the best place to visualize that are in videos of people who have gone up there. So if you wish, you can hop over to YouTube and go to my channel, where I have videos, again, putting your own eyes on it. Let your own mind make your visions. Don't read it in a book and go with what somebody else tells you. I'm suggesting to put your eyes on it and do it on your own. This playlist right here is the one I have for things on the plateau. And the first thing after this commercial that we're looking at right here, 3, 2, 1, is a gentleman. This guy is an 18-year-old guy who got fined a few $1,000s and spent a weekend in the Giza prison, which is nothing like the Disney prison, but he climbed the surface of the structure, and luckily he made a video. This video is a short, like 90-second version of it, but he climbed up there, and there's like an 18-minute version, and anybody who wants to invest, he said he's glad to sell people the video footage, and if you want to buy it from him, I would be happy to take a copy. Now, I was pointing out to you the other day that in areas there are brick. Now, at first when I saw that, I was kind of taken back, because I'll show you other spots. But you can see right here, clearly, these 3 steps are all brick. Now, that's not where somebody stole a rock out of there because it was made of gold and then retrofitted it with brick. This was in there from his time of construction. And when I saw this, and there's a couple of different spots. This, like I said, this video is only 90 seconds. But in his longer videos, which I do think I actually have had, it looks like they're not on my playlist anymore because Google likes to take things off of it when I have my head turned, that there are more than that spot where there's brick. Oh, here's a nice picture of that antenna I was talking about up there. Okay, you can see him while he was up there. And he climbed up there, which is hard to do today. And on his way down, he was put in jail for a couple of days. So I don't recommend you do it yourself, but if anybody wants to, please take pictures and video, and I'll be glad to take copies of them from you, because they're really important. Oh, and one thing, I don't know if you can see it in this picture, but you've always asked me, from the other corner of this structure, where you can see the third pyramid, which you can't see here because the second pyramid is blocking it, you can also see what from the top of there really looks like a fourth pyramid, even though it's about 1/4 the size of the third of the structures. So when you're looking at it, you got the one structure, you see the other structure, then you got the other one, and then there's one like that. And it really looks like there's 4 structures. But like I said, this one is about a quarter the height of that one. And these ones are half the height of the other 2. So I do not believe there was ever a 4th larger structure on the plateau. Now, what I originally got into this was this other gentleman, after this short little commercial. This other gentleman, right there, his nice little face, he climbed the 3rd structure, again, the one I like to call Building 7. And when he got to the top, which I'm going to jump to really quick, you can see that the top of this structure clearly comes to a point. Like, you can't even get any closer to a point other than if it was like a pinpoint. Come on, get up there. You got another, what, level or 2 to go? Come on, go, 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 go. I guess I didn't go far enough. Now he's at the top, so let's go back a tiny bit. One more back. Right as he cusps it, you can see that there is a ring, 9 stones around the outside with 1 stone in the center. So it goes 9 stones, then 1 stone in the center. It goes right to a point. The other 2 structures don't come to a point. Each of them is kind of leveled at the top. One of them being 9 foot square. You can see right there. That's the one top stone. The other one right here comes to a 9 foot thing, and you can't see the first structure because it's behind this one from where we are here, and it goes to the spot where it's 40 feet by 40 feet, 39 feet by 39 feet to be technical. And looking down, this right here is the one that from the top of the first structure, when you look at it, looks optically like it's maybe 100 feet further, but because it's right next to it, it looks like you're going bing, 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 when really it's next to it. So it's a semi-optical illusion. And I can understand how somebody in the 1800s climbed up there and looked across it, can say, oh yeah, there are 4 pyramids, 4 very distinct pyramids, when really there are 3 very distinct and one that optically looks like a 4th one. You can see how that one is also very well shaped. That one is very well shaped. And the one at the base of the Great Giza Pyramid that we are going to be looking inside of shortly, it is also very well shaped. You can't see it from here. We'll look at that. Actually, we can look at that here on a map. I'll go really quick. If my computer works with me. And we're going to look at satellite view, which I really think are air balloons. But this guy right here is also fairly very well shaped. All the other ones are not. They're truncated or halved or things of that nature. And we can get into why, I believe, as we peruse the system. But am I on the wrong side? I need to be above the system here. Looks like I'm in a... Sure, go ahead. Well, that really goes into the technicality of what do you call a pyramid, because there are the things in the like down in South America, they like to call them pyramids. I mean, where do you draw the line as to what's a pyramid and what isn't a pyramid? Here, you can see it right there, the 3rd structure. And somehow there was a way I was able to get that little Google guy where I had a really clear image of it the other day. Of course, he's not falling where I want him to fall right now. To get the, see, I'm behind something, so you can't see. I wish I could climb up on top of here. Maybe I just did. Now, see, I got this one other structure in the way. There is a spot. Oh, there it is. Okay, that one is much more defined as being a structure than this one here, which when you look at it, it's halved and it has a fairly flat top. It doesn't come to a point. And then this one here is actually at a lower elevation. It is at the elevation of this coarseness right here, where this one, if you look at, is at the elevation of this coarseness right there. And I don't think any of those are by mistake. This coarseness, and this coarseness, you can even see the delineation between those. And they echo through the three structures, and that goes into function when you look at things that I hopefully will get to in a short while. This right here, the picture they have actually really shows the what you can refer to as the fourth structure, because when you're on the top of that one looking towards it, you can see this, and you can see those three when you're at the what would be the southeast corner. If you're on the practically anywhere else up there, this structure is hidden because of that structure. You can still kind of see that one. And somewhere I had a great photo where it was taken from either a chopper or a drone where it was up there. And you could, visually, you had a really good picture of all four of those structures. And I only bring that up because several times you would ask me, did I think there was a fourth structure? And I do think that optically it may have looked that way when people first got there. Here's a really good image. You can see how that one is taller than that one, and that one is shorter. And you can see the second structure kind of peering over there. And even here, looking at here, that second structure looks like it's short, when really that second structure is actually about 40 feet taller in elevation than the first structure. Although the first structure is actually taller itself because the base is at a lower point. And that, when people don't like to visualize or admit that to themselves, is where I somewhere on here have the there it is. There are a couple of them, but this is one which shows you the elevation of each of the structures. I believe that the Nile at the time would have run right down here and would have come to basically the paws of the Sphinx, whatever you want to call it. This guy here rides at an elevation where it starts at about, it says 60 feet here, but I was told it was closer to 50. And this is where anybody who actually ventures there, we all have cell phones that'll show us elevation. I would like somebody to go there, stand at the base of it, and actually mark down how many feet above sea level it likes to say. And then compare that to the base of the paws of the Sphinx. And I want to compare that to the base of this structure, compare that to the base of this structure to try to get more accurate readings. But no matter what you do, this structure sits about 30 feet, at least 20. Yeah. Right. Well, I didn't either until I started really focusing on it. Let's not tilt this. When you look at the three structures, this one being the shortest of them, and I'm going to put them next to each other because if I was to lay them out, it would go all the way across the paper if I was to do it to scale. The second structure is about maybe 10 feet shorter than it and goes up with, really tall. And then the next structure is actually about 30 feet lower in elevation again, and it goes up, has a flat top, and comes back down. Now, they're all squished together, but really when this comes into play is when you look at the inner guts of this guy, how it goes down, and you've got a couple of rooms and a couple of rooms at a lower elevation, then one that comes off at an angle. Yeah. This is my phone. Oh, I think that if you touch either with your mouse or whatever, it will make that one the priority. Because on my screen, this guy. Okay. Now that is this. That what's really that I want you guys to see is this. They say is about 215 feet tall. This one is about 480 feet tall, and I'm doing it in feet because I'm not in the UK, but in meters it works out the same. The elevations are elevations. This guy is 450 feet tall. If it was extended to its apex, it would be 490 feet tall. This the top of it is at the exact spot where the two, I'm just going to call them conduits, come into the area that's the Great Giza Pyramid. The area here, which they like to refer to as the King's Chamber, which is actually kind of tallish, and this comes to about the half mark of that. But, you know, you got to give me some artistic license here. Where this is, if you notice on this structure, there is a cutout where this touches the surface, which would be, if I jump over to here and go back to that one picture we were looking at. Here we go. This area right here is the spot at the top where they have the ceiling, the area above what they like to call the King's Chamber. This level right here, actually, it's kind of up here. You can't see this, but it goes in, up, up. Where that step is at practically the base. I think it's more hip level in the area of the King's Chamber. We'll get into that. The area down here, this spot, is actually at an elevation where it coincides with the hallway, which is in the Queen's Chamber, where they have the Queen's Chamber in there, and then the hallway that goes down it, and then you got the Grand Gallery. Okay, again, give me some artistic license. In here you got a what they like to call an antechamber. So imagine this moved over a tiny bit. All right, and then this goes down where it pairs with the section down here. And again, I don't have there's the grotto, which is at ground level, and the area down here we've got the one room which actually extends down, the tail which extends out. You got the little room there, and then up. All right, so that's a rough drawing. We move over to the other structure. You're going to find that the area in here, its room is such that it is below the water level, which I will suggest to you is in the Queen's Chamber, in that Queen's Chamber hallway where they have that watermark. This is the apex of this is just above that water level, such that the room that's in here is actually underwater, under that water level. It has a area that comes out and then comes up. And if you look at photos, it's best to look at photos, you'll notice that where that junction is actually a tooth that comes down like so before it goes down the hallway. And when we get into how the system was operating, that's not any relevance to the tomb dogma theory, but very relevant to the functionality of what's going on. Then there's a area that comes down where they've got a lower level, and on here there's also two more where when it comes down it goes up, comes down and goes up. This one is about a foot higher in elevation than that side, and it comes down and across. And then they've got those two holes in the wall that I would like to find out how deep they go, and if anybody has actually tried to shove coat hangers or something in there to see where they go to, how far they extend, or if they actually come to a brick wall. And if that brick wall they come to is if there's any chance that it's porous, so that gases and or liquids can flow through it, but visually it looks like, oh, it was designed to protect secret treasures. But either way, these are things that I, without getting down there and doing experimentation of my own, can't get. And the photos I have really don't answer the question. And hardly anybody ever tours these two structures. Why? Because they're not curious. I'm curious, but I am not there, so I can't really tour them. What I believe is occurring within this structure, with this in the whole system. Oh, and there's the other piece, the Osiris shaft. So ignore this for right now, because that is actually this. The Osiris shaft sits at an elevation which is approximately here. No, if that's the grotto, that's ground level. So it's actually about between the subterranean chamber and there. The Osiris shaft starts at that elevation and then goes down to where even to this day it hits the water table. That, within this whole system, I'm suggesting is the controlled ground. Now, a couple of other things. When you look at this Osiris shaft, there's a spot where, let me draw this over here, where there is a room that's at an angle, and it goes up, comes down, and then it goes down. And you'll notice that where you enter in to this room, this elevation is at a higher elevation than where this comes. And I do believe that if you are working with, just imagine oil and water, you're going to have where the one will ride, but it can't climb up to go to spill back down. It's the control valve, if you want to say. And then down here is where they have half a dozen what they like to call open caskets. And then it goes down one more level. And those levels work in conjunction with actually the areas in here. And again, as I grow the system, you'll see. But these pieces, I don't even have to make up. This is all documented, but things that people don't ever really look into, because the tourist people don't bother to mention them, because it has nothing to. And it's blurry on mine. Why is it blurry? Why is it? Let me see if I can get it to focus. Well, you get the general idea. And you can always look at some of my other videos where I go into it in detail and pictures and such. Anyway, what I feel the way the whole system is functioning is that water is basically riding at an elevation of approximately where the pen is right there. And during the whole time it's sitting there, we are taking and basically something that they didn't know in the 1800s, supposedly electrolysis, actually, was it? It was 16 something when they discovered hydrogen, I believe is the time frame. They discovered hydrogen, and I think it was 1640, if I remember correctly. And then it wasn't until 1780-ish that they actually isolated and discovered oxygen, supposedly. So in the early 1500s and such like that, when people look at these structures, they couldn't fathom what it was doing. So they created a story and then have enhanced and perpetuated that story. And I can't really blame the historians that are pigeonholed into the tomb dogma, because it's just what they've been told. I, like I said, put blinders on, just focused on the structure. And when I see this, I see it like a lab setup. In this particular scenario, the only two spots that this structure, which is pretty much bathed in a limestone bath, the whole area, the ground is all limestone, which is fairly non-conductive. The only two spots that deviate from that practice is the pit that's in the grotto, they like to call the grotto, which is this room right here. And I have a sketch, which I feel is fairly accurate, of that room right here. And again, you can look at these on the website that I suggested. This area right here is the only spot that it touches earth. Everything else is a bath of limestone. Ground level is right about here. And I believe it actually depicts, yeah, you can see ground level is right about there. The structure is above it, and limestone is beneath it, except for here where it touches earth. This is a top-down view of the area, and this would be the area where it touches earth. I'm going to suggest to you, and if you don't want to believe that an earth battery exists, then think of this as your 7th grade high school classroom, and let's put this is actually the cathode. That's where hydrogen is going to be bubbling up, and this right here is the anode. That's where oxygen is going to be bubbling up, and the oxygen works its way out of the system and is actually I believe it's just a byproduct. Now it does work while it's exiting the system, but it's just a byproduct which would go out. I suggest to you that the water level is there. So it's bubbling out through the rocks that they supposedly broke through to gain entry to this structure after they went through the Thieves Tunnel. And that, while I'm looking up here real quick to try to find a picture of it, is actually this area right here. And supposedly when they entered into that particular area of the structure, the rocks that were in here were loose fitting, no mortar, okay? And that's fine, because I'm going to suggest to you that the air would have been coming out and water would have been coming in, and that was kind of working like the thing you put on your aerator in your fish tank, so that the instead of just open up to the air, the water was fighting to come in, the air was fighting to come out, and that would create a backlog of an air bubble. That air bubble, I'm going to suggest to you, grew so that it actually worked its way down below the area where the ascending chamber meets the descending chamber, right where the hang on. Again, this would have been great if I had it pre-planned, but you guys are working with spontaneousness here. There is a photo I have of it in this system. There it is. Nope, that's the sub chamber. There it is, right there. This is the area I speak of, where people today venture up here, go to this shaft, work their way up to the grand gallery, or right down here, work their way down to the subterranean chamber. This was all filled in. We broke through that, damaged the vessel, the containment vessel, but it's still this area right here. And what's happening is, as I was talking about before, the superstructure on the outside of here, with its sweeping pattern, is taking all the ambient static electricity from the wind blowing back and forth, which would collect naturally by nature on the outside of the structure. On this structure, it's just going to sit here, and whatever amount of static electricity nature would allow it to hold is venting off into the ether at a set rate. But the amount that will be on there, that is the norm, okay? Well, as far as when you're working with electricity, you got, one side and the other side. The difference, the energy is the difference between the energy states and the potential for change, because nature wants to equal out. This right here is going to have an amount of static electricity, but not a lot. This structure is designed so that static electricity is pushed to the top third of the structure and quarantined there by that third step, that it can't jump across. I mean, it can, but it will build up enough energy to jump across it, and that's the amount, that's the potential energy that it can hold. And this, the way it's designed, the capacity of static electricity that the surface of the structure can hold is fairly immense, because it's fairly large, which would also compensate for how people in the 1800s, again, would stand up there with a little jar, put a little wet rag in there, and throw little sparks. Their hair would stand up on end. It would act like you were on the surface of a large Van de Graaff generator, because in essence you are. This static electricity is brought down through the system, and we're going to show you how in a second here, but it's brought down through the system and then utilized. I don't think it's quarantined or tapped. I think it's utilized within the system, so that it's not really a power source like Chris Dunn wants to think it is. I think it's utilized kind of like how a water mill takes that energy and puts it through the spindle, and then the water goes downstream. But that turning of it, that is utilized. It's not stored and put into a battery. It's utilized right there on site when you look at how an old water mill used to work before we had electricity. Anyway, let's go back to how I feel the system is working. The hydrogen is actually brought up. It comes up into above the Great Giza Pyramid. It goes out of the shafts that are in this structure, in this room. We'll go back to this real quick. It doesn't note them on here, but if you read all of the stories about this particular section, supposedly in the southern wall, which would be either this wall pointing towards you, because north is up and south is down in this drawing. So in the southern wall, it's either here or here. I do think it might be both. There are holes drilled in the southern wall. They like to say were for hiding their scrolls, their secret, super secret scrolls. I think they were just conduits through the limestone. And actually, since this one is actually through the base of the structure, because the ground level is here, so that's actually through the base of the structure, go south, and then would proceed north up, till they came into the top of the Great Giza Pyramid above the King's Chamber, the area where they find seeds, shells, and dust that they can't account for. I feel that was, seeds and shells and stuff that were in the water that were brought up with the updraft of the hydrogen through the system over time. You are not supposed to be in here. What part of not supposed to be in here did you... Yeah, he went outside, and then he came in through his little... I have a little hole over there so he can come in and out anytime he wants. And he decided to go out the front door, around, and come in the back door, because that's just what he does. He loves me. Anyway, the hydrogen brought up to the top, where the two shafts that come into the King's Chamber, only the one on the south ever breaches the structure. And I actually have a photograph of it somewhere, where it is the only one that breaches the structure. The northern side, it goes to the edge of the structure, but then supposedly there's a granite block. Now, I don't know if it's really granite. And until somebody climbs up there like that 18-year-old kid and doesn't get arrested or gets permission and actually can go to where it is and take a picture, video. I'm going to have to put him back in the other room a second. Why are you doing this to me? Look, I can't always pay attention to you. Please. All right, so hydrogen goes up to the top, combines with the air being 78% nitrogen, 21% oxygen, and 1% all other gases, which include carbon dioxide, get pulled into the system, and we'll get into how they get pulled into the system. But naturally, the air would flow in through that one open vent where right now, today, they have a fan in there so that people get fresh air while they're in the King's Chamber. But at the time, it was actually very open and had a very unique shape, which we're going to discuss as soon as I can find it really quickly. I guess really quickly is a relative term. There it is, right here. A very unique shape. And when you look at this right here is teardrop shaped. You got a little oval there. This is the same elevation as the conduit on the other side. And then it comes down where it's kind of at a trapezoidal shape. If you look at that, that's like a trapezoid. Well, it is, because it's a black and white picture. And I do have a color picture somewhere, but I think that one's actually a better picture than the color picture I have. Where is it? Someday I'll figure a way to sort these. Like, I'll give them all a number so they fall into alignment. Order I want to use them. I don't see the color picture. It may have disappeared, like so many other things. We'll just, for right now, I'll just draw it really quick. Oh, and this point right here, this actually protrudes out of the wall. Let me see if I can pull it up and you can see. You can see right here where it goes into the wall half a dozen inches. So you have a box, which is in the wall, that goes back from the wall, which is really, honestly, as flat can be. You look at this particular room, people are in awe of how square or squared or rectangular, or however you want to look at it, this room is, because it's actually a big rectangle, not technically a square. But that opening is a square. Right in the center of that particular square is this point right here. And what you can't see here, although you might be able to, is the four corners that come out from that point. So they go down, and you've got 4 planes that come down to the area. If I was going to draw it 3D, are like so. The opening is, like I said, that teardrop shape right there. And then at the base of it there is where you have the trapezoid, where you got the opening that goes into the wall, where you have another oval opening there, which then leads to the shaft that goes out of the structure. And I don't have, but I, again, used to, had a drawing of that, and I'm missing it right now. I haven't seen it in the past 2 or 3 days while we were looking at this. But a great picture of that, which I can get to really quickly, if I can find it, is within here. There was a gentleman who in the 1990s, before they changed a bunch of stuff, was able to get into the structure. And here's a picture of him, a human, lying in that particular opening. So there's your color picture where you can see the point and you can see the 4 edges going out. So you can visualize the size of that. Now this is also very important. This right here is the areas I was showing you the other day. That is like where they like to call the thieves tunnel, not the thieves entrance, which is down here where they came in, but it's the thieves tunnel. Now I'm going to suggest to you it was not made by thieves, because again, this gentleman, whose name was, believe it or not, Charles Brown. Hang on one second. Yes, ma'am. Okay.
Cucumbers have gone tomatoes.
And you left the air conditioning on and the front door wide open, so Phoenix went out the front door and came in through the dog door.
What I thought was, I know I planted cucumbers. That's
okay.
Not a cucumber. That's a tomato plant.
Okay. Can we talk about this? Can we talk about this?
It's got 4 tomatoes in it.
Okay. All right. So, where was I? This gentleman, Charles Brown, had his own vision of what the structures were. However, I think he took very awesome photos and did a lot of research. Now, a couple of photos that he did that are very awesome are not the one I was looking for. Let me see if I can find it real quick. Oh, here's another picture without a human line of that opening. And again, you can see the 4 parts, and you can see how that area is actually into the. Now, what's that's doing is you got this straight wall, and you've got a point that sticks out of the wall. Now, anybody who's worked with static electricity knows that that point is going to, if you're working with like a box, I'm sure you've seen where people put a box and then they put a piece of cellophane across the top, and then you rub it with a cloth and make that box a collector of static electricity. It's not like a Leyden jar. There's another name for it, but I don't know it off the top of my head. If you put like a penny in there, or a freestanding little 4-sided die, one of your Dungeons and Dragons things, or anything like that, the anomaly, the deviation from the side will create the static electricity to use that as a focal point, just like the top of the pyramid would be a focal point when you're doing the Leyden jar experiments. Oh, and this is what I was talking about, how this particular break in the wall there is the exact same elevation as this right here. So this protrudes down below it, and this protrudes down below it. That's much more relevant when we discuss the water elevation in there, and how, as the water would rise, it would choke off this opening, and as the water would recede, it would open it up to allow more air in. And you can also see the discoloration here where they've tried to clean it, but it's very evident from older pictures in the earlier 1900s how there's a lot of, I'll say, soot carbonation on here, where a fire was taking place, or there was some sort of, and they like to say that people were burning stuff in there to create heat or whatever excuse they have. It doesn't stop the fact that right there was carbonation, but it wasn't such that it looks like there was really a fire. Again, one of the stories that don't make sense. Oh, and this gentleman is the one that actually took a really good picture. I had a nice phone call with him back in the, I'd say 2013, before I even met you, where he had said he paid someone to climb up the structure, and because at the time he wasn't of the ability to do it, he just didn't have the oomph. And they took a picture, which just jumped. I just saw it, and it just jumped, of the opening. Let me find it again. I just had it on my screen. Of the one and only conduit that breaches the surface of the pyramid. And I've lost it. It was just on my screen, and I've lost it. Although I might be staring at it. Oh, there it is, right there. This right here is the actual opening. Very clearly, that is the southern shaft where it protrudes from the structure. Right there. Okay, that's it. And if you were allowed to climb up there, you'd be able to see that on your own. But again, they don't let you climb up the structure anymore. A, they don't want somebody falling. B, they don't want people realizing that as you start crawling the structure, your hair is going to stand up on end as if you were standing on the surface of a huge Van de Graaff generator, because you are. So where I'm losing track of what I was saying. Anyway, these pictures are all evident. Oh, what I was looking for is the one shaft that they like to call the Thieves Tunnel. And if I can find it really quick, it's one of these photos. Let me just go through these photos in larger format, which you should be able to see on your screen there. Oh, and even he suggests that the Nile River is kind of where I suggested. Well, this is where it is today. I suggest it was right up against it, and he does too, this particular image. So there it is. That's what he was suggesting. I feel that's fairly accurate as to where the elevation of the Nile River was at the time that this was a functioning structure. That shows you uncannily how all the interior structure of this structure is on a north to south plane. It is not scattered throughout it like it would if it was some sort of a storage vessel. People like to say it was a place to keep grains and stuff like that. BS. It's really easy to see on a 2D plane, even though it's a 3D structure. Waiting for this picture to come up. There's the entrance I was talking about before. I don't believe there was any pivoting door as shown there. I feel that there were rocks sitting on it. Just picture somebody just dumping gravel into there, if it helps you mentally picture. And then the air, in this case, I believe it was actually oxygen, would be fighting its way up through the gravel. The water would be fighting its way down through the gravel, and that would create a backflow. Now, things that are relevant up near the top of the descending chamber, it's nice and smooth. Down near the bottom, just before the lip, which we'll talk about, even in the Great Giza Pyramid right here at this juncture where it's coming out, it is shaped such that the air coming out of there, the oxygen, would actually bubble up from there and over the time would cause this rippling effect. And we're going to discuss really quickly what I think was going on there, since I just showed you the picture. As the air is fighting out, the best spot is photos that I can get to really quick. And again, I didn't take these photos. They exist. Here's the area I was talking about where it comes out. You can see right there, and how it's broken up here. Yeah, you can see. I'm looking for a photo. Oh, this is relevant when we get into trying to read the structure. This is, again, a picture from the 1800s before they cleared all that loose rock out of there. This right here is rock that they took from over in front of the dead end shaft. This rock here they pulled from in front of the doorway. Those are new rock. You can see how you can't really totally tell, but this is wet rock. That's why it's a darker, wet sand. That's why it's a darker color, where the other stuff was dry. They pulled it from this area here to up there. So at the time, the rock actually filled that. And again, it's more important when we look at the flow of the liquids, but they moved that stuff away to get a feel for the structure. And this rock here is actually moved over to there in the other photo. There's a lot of the photos. This they've since covered over and now squared it so it doesn't have that little V there. That is relevant when we talk about how everything was functioning there. Again, not relevant if it's a tomb. Now this is what I wanted to show you. Back here it's smooth. Up here it's rippled. And I have even better photos. Oh, and this right here is where the rock was in the 1800s. Today, the rock sits a little further back, and you can see where the rock sat when we look at photos. This rock now sits back here. It was there, it's now here. Not super relevant in the tomb dogma thing, but very relevant when we talk about function. And they like to say that this rock was one of the ones they took from the top and it rolled down and settled there. Well, if it rolled down, it wouldn't have settled right around the corner. It may have settled there, or it would have settled in the middle of the chamber, being that it was rolling down. It wouldn't have gone into a corner. It doesn't roll down and then scoop into a corner. And because it was just sitting there, happens to leave scarring on the wall that we'll address in a later photo, a more current day photo, as soon as I come across one. What is it doing? Okay, that's, you can see here where they dug stuff out to get up to the shaft. Where that is actually the shaft that goes up to the grotto. That's where that gentleman is standing right now. These are, it's another photo of it. There's the grotto that we were just talking about before. That's a gentleman sitting right up here in the grotto. Okay, that's a photograph from the 1800s. And I like photographs over drawings. These are rocks that, again, you can see how this dirt here is fairly smooth. I believe this was all underwater at the time. And what they don't point out, I've never seen anybody else point it, but this right here is etched, like, you know, drawn into the roof, and that is the same shape as the boss mark, which I'm not familiar with, or I don't know how much you guys know of the boss mark, but there's another one of those in the antechamber right before the king's chamber. That's the area we talked about before that goes up to the grand gallery and down to the subterranean chambers. There's the entrance. There's a gentleman standing up there, just so you get a size of how large this structure is. Extraordinarily large. That's just the grand gallery. Relevant when we talk about how these right here are shaped, and when we get into how it's working, they come down and they all go up, down, and I'll suggest to you that any condensation, like if you were to take a squirt bottle and put it on there, the water would condensate, come down and drip, condensate, come down and drip, and it would rinse, repeat throughout the whole structure until it comes down to the area. It's a not very good drawing, but these are actually between here and here is where these are. So this, just push it over. Again, artistic license there. And we'll get to that when we talk about what's occurring in the grand gallery. But what I want to point out is this is all underwater. You can tell by how it's sitting. There's other areas. Oh, that is the second structure. I was talking about the water level, I believe, would actually be, this is forged entrance. Okay, so ignore that. The water level would be here. Thank you. Would be here, and this is all underground. This whole section, everything is underground except for this. This actually opens above ground to the external of the structure. When I say above ground, above the water line of what I believe. These, somebody else kind of feels that I did, that this was underwater, and they themselves, in this particular drawing, put retaining walls to hold the water. I think it was more of a just sand, but either way, that's how I feel things. That's in the Up in the pre-chamber, I'm just going through these photos, trying to pick ones that I want relevant, but not right immediately. There are cuts in the floor. This is just before the grand step. This is the railing. This would be the grand step. And you can see right here where they poured stuff. I showed you that, where the grand step, they took the funnel and made it go away. This, they reinforced and put stuff on there because this was all broken and damaged. I'll suggest to you a little bit later how that damage occurred. Again, it fits into my view of the system, and the damage is just evidence of how I believe it was working. These, I took screen prints of websites where I acquired some of the photos from, just because when at a later time, this is where I was suggesting the dust, the hydrogen would come up into this area and then would work its way down and come through. What not a lot of people realize is if you were to walk over into the back, it would be the west north corner of the King's Chamber, and jump up and down, you're standing on a piece of metal, not a piece of rock. They covered over a huge hole, huge, 10 feet deep, that used to be in that room, but because it had made no bearing on the tomb dogma, they covered it over again, so probably people don't fall into there, and it would kind of shed some doubt to the tomb dogma. I'm looking for, there's that other photo we already looked at. I don't know why it's taking so long to get through some of these. That's just orientation. Where, yeah, I'm looking, just scrolling through all the photos. There's the 3 structures. This is a good image. However, there's a lot of things these leave out, like the grotto. The ground does not go up. It's actually flat across the whole thing. This was one of the things back in the day when I had the spherical earth idea that I was kind of concerned about as to the orientation of the structure. If there was a corner structure, a corner rock that would, had some little label on it, how we put, established 1862. And then from there, the structure is squared against such that the earth would either come down around it, or the earth was right on it, or the earth rolled so that it was to the lower side of it. But of course, I don't follow any of that thinking anymore because, well, I'm a little bit wiser now. Again, that's Chris Dunn. I started by looking into a lot of his ideas, and it was he that actually directed. Oh, there's right here at this particular point, they had a grate over that hole in the back corner. Like I said, today they put a metal plate that they make look like rock, so that you don't even realize what you're looking at. These are the numbers that are used to calculate that image that we were looking at as to the depth and deviation of each of the steps going up the structure. Again, I didn't make these numbers. Somebody else did. I agree with them. And there was a gentleman in 2019 that recreated this using a stereo drone so that they could get depth and orientation, and actually has a 3D image of the surface of the structure, which I would love to get my hands on and reprint, like about a meter in size, just so that you can run your fingers over it and feel the deviations, as opposed to just seeing them in numbers. This is another orientation showing you how things relate to each other, how the center of the structure is actually where what they like to call the grand step. I don't like to use that word. I like to call it the grand funnel, just so it focuses in your mind that it was a funnel. How it all fits, how everything aligns. That's more relevant when we look into how it was working. There's another picture of Chris Dunn. There's the picture we already saw. Another place I stole some pictures from. More pictures. These are pictures of what they like to call the dead end shaft. And if you look kind of at it, you can see that the roof is kind of it's not flat. It kind of goes up and down, kind of like the edge of an inchworm. Now I'm making it. It is. One side is at a higher elevation than the other, and it is done like an inchworm. And I think that's going to come more relevant when we look at what's occurring. We'll talk about that. I'm going to circle back to that, like heels up Harrison likes to say, in a few minutes. And I think I feel that gases were being generated into here. We'll get into that in a minute, and that they would work their way out on this side because that's at a higher elevation. So the gas would come to the side and then work its way out. But we'll get to that in a little bit. This is in the antechamber. The boss mark, the official one, is right on the back side of this. I know I have a picture of that in a few images. There is another picture showing the elevations. This is just showing you. These are just here is what that opening looks like today. Like I said, they put a fan in it, so you can't even see kind of how it looked because they've stuck a fan in there. Now, granted, when you're in there and you're exploring it, it's nice to have a fan pulling air into it because with like a dozen people in there, it's kind of got to get stuffy. But I think it does detract from being able to visualize what the structure actually looked like in its heyday. This is another picture of the dead end shaft. Now, over time, hundreds of people have crawled in and out of there. I'm going to say hundreds because we've been in this structure for the past, couple hundred years. They hypothetically broke into it in the 815, and ever since then, people have been crawling around in there. So what you see here is a lot of people's foot marks. But the pictures, the good pictures from the 1800s, before people really started climbing in there, you could see definite piles of dirt. Even though people were crawling, you can see piles of dirt. And that's going to come relevant again when I talk about what I feel was occurring in there. Let's see what other pictures I can get to really quick. Just scrolling through them. Again, these are websites I stole the pictures off of because I haven't been there, so I had to take other people's pictures. And I like to document where I got each picture from, so people, if somebody tries to question me, you can see here they've pulled all the dirt and stuff that was out of there. In that picture from the 1800s, there was dirt in here. It was fairly smooth. Again, I feel it was underwater. However, it wasn't totally smooth. What I'd like to find is a really nice image. Let's see if I can cheat here and find, this one. Well, I don't think they made it. I don't think they made it for bling bling reasons. I think they made it for functional reasons. You see here 4 very distinct piles. Okay, this is before they cleared all that dirt out. We just looked at a picture where they cleared all that dirt out. You can also see this rock is still in the position it was at the time. It was against that one wall. When I'll get to it really quick. When the air works its way out of here, and I'm going to start with a cleaner sheet, comes out of the area that's referred to as the unfinished room. We have the pit in the unfinished room that goes down to earth. And you've got the fins over here, which were covered in rock, as we saw, because that's communication, not function. So it was protected under. Well, I'll show you that in a tiny bit. This opening is below. If you take the floor line of here, this opening is just below the floor line, and I did that poorly. This should be where it's kind of that shape I was showing you, and it goes down. When the air is working its way out of the structure, this goes up here, and I'm accenting this a lot. It's not quite this big. It's only a few inches. You saw that. When the water level in here, let's just put the water level there, the gases would come up into here and into the room, and then they'd work their way out of the system. You noticed in this area, it kind of looked like stucco. Then what you can see if I have, this could be a good picture. Right about here, where the difference between where it looks like stucco and where it goes to smooth, there's actually a one inch or 1 square inch tooth that cuts into the ceiling, and then it's smooth. What this will allow, and you could try this at home in your own backyard. In fact, I did. If I go to my videos, where are my videos? Really quickly. In my videos, I have where I made a model, which has long since been lost because it was back in California. Come on. Catch up to me, little screeny. Oh, you guys can all see this on the other screen. You can get a clearer image than, yeah. As soon as it comes up, there we go. And I look at my content. Come on, computer. And I scroll back a couple of years. Let's go back to, I've got like 140 videos now. I've been doing this long enough. I go back to, no, further. Here we go. This right here is a model I made. And let's pull up the video. And I'm going to mute it because I'm going to talk instead of it. Okay. You can see here I was using the rock as the orientation, but just imagine that's down here instead. It doesn't matter where it is. What's relevant is gas, use the word gas, I believe it was oxygen, came into the room. And as it creeped its way along the surface, it would take root in that tooth. And then the bubble would grow across the smooth area until it saturated that area. I'm sure you've probably had a follow. You want to pause? Okay, where you have a fish bowl, and for some reason the water level hits the top of it. If you get an air bubble, it will grow. That air bubble will grow until it gets to the edge, and then it'll bubble around the edge. And when it bubbles around the edge, water will come in to fill the void. Well, in the system here, that air bubble will grow until it gets to that edge, and then an air bubble will bubble out, and the water will come in to fill that void. And when it comes in to fill that void, once the void is full, this water coming down will act like a water hammer. And the reason it acts like a water hammer is just because it has filled the void, and then that pressure will echo through the system, which is why you see piles of dirt in there, because that's where the frequency of that water will hit. I don't know how familiar you are with when you're working in a house and you don't have your plumbing right, and you get the pipes go bang, 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 bang. It's going to be of that same nature where it's acting like a water hammer. Now, I believe that particular, that pressure, that frequency of the water coming through is what then perpetuates through the system and works its way into the what they like to call the dead end shaft. And I feel the reason that it's bubbled and it goes down for 30 some feet is so that in the right spot, when that water hammer goes through, it will, as it hits a specific spot, whether it's in the void or right, if it hits right on the lip, it's going to cause cavitation. And that cavitation, I'm sure anybody who's had a propeller on a motorboat knows that it's going to release gas. And when it releases the gas, it also releases some energy. I don't think the energy is the relevant point here. I think the gas is, and that gas is what then bubbles out of the system, as you were mentioning how the one side is higher than the other within there. It'll come out the higher side, and then that gas will bubble into this room and then evacuate out. I think that gas is actually hydrogen gas, although this is where it's going to take a physicist. When you get cavitation, when you're working with a propeller, is that oxygen, hydrogen, a mixture of it? I'm not exactly sure. I don't have the ability to duplicate that, capture the gas, and figure it out on my own. I mean, I could, but it just takes a little kind of monetary investment and a time investment, which right now I don't have. There are people who are experts on this, probably anybody who works with motorboats, and they could probably give me that answer, but I haven't found the right person to actually give me the answer. A lot of people are like, oh no, because they haven't cared enough to look into it. But that is also why you see the piles of dirt in the system. And that is, I believe, evidence of the pounding, the water hammer that works its way through here, which is why if you've looked into it, there's a gentleman named John Cadman, who Chris Dunn actually endorsed, that was suggesting how the whole system was a water hammer with a moving piece down here, and the water would evacuate, blah, blah, blah. I don't think any of that is factually true, but the fact that he found evidence of what he feels is cavitation, and I don't disbelieve it with what I feel. And he also found evidence of how he thinks it was a water hammer, and I do think it was a water hammer. Why it was water hammering, that I would like to experiment on and ask somebody who is much more familiar with what is occurring within the water, how the water itself is reacting within the system, what it's doing. But it was doing something, and it was working. Anyway, then the air would evacuate out. You also notice in the particular thing, the conduit that comes out from the side is just below. You can say anything you want. Yeah. I do believe that was some sort of an airport of something. That is what I feel on that particular structure. However, again, I haven't explored the whole structure, and there's probably a lot more evidence that will lead me one way or the other. My focus, the one I have been hammering on, to use the water hammer comment, is this particular setup. And because I've found more and more evidence that kind of leads me the direction. I'm not looking for, I guess I'm looking for confirmation bias. But I honestly feel that the confirmation bias I keep stumbling across is leading me in the correct direction, because the whole system does seem to come to play. They are taking these gases, burning them back together, bringing it down. And anybody who's worked with electrolysis, if you do it for a really, really long time, you're going to get what they like to call heavy water. Heavy water, which is instead of hydrogen oxygen, it's actually deuterium oxygen. Supposedly, it's 1 out of every 6,700 particulates of water is actually deuterium. And then from there, of those 6,700s, about 1 out of 8,000 of the deuteriums is actually tritium oxide. Well, if you start with a bottle of water and you boil it or electrolyze it or create a vacuum, the gas that's releasing is going to be hydrogen and oxygen. The gases that are going to release are going to be hydrogen and oxygen. The bond that these two elements are joined together with to create the compound that we call water, it takes 1.27-ish volts of DC, how we record, how we currently express electricity, to break that water apart. Now, in comparison, to break this water apart, I think this is actually 1.235 volts, if I remember correctly. This one takes like 1.237 volts, and this one takes like 1.23, like let's just say 1.24 volts. bonds. I don't know the exact numbers, but each one of these bonds is stronger than the one before it. So in nature, the weakest bond breaks first. So first you're going to boil off the water, and then you're left with a pool of deuterium and tritium. And if you keep boiling it or electrolysizing it, eventually you'll be left with tritium. So just like how we distill things, one is the pool of everything, and then as you boil it off, you'll be left with a pool of those two, and as you keep boiling it off, you'll be left with a pool of that one. Yes. You could look at it that way. Yes. I mean, I don't know the exact word to look at it. This does more than just one thing. This particular structure had many different functionalities to it. I have just been focusing on, in different areas, either how the water is flowing or how the energy is flowing. The energy being how we already showed the external side of the structure, how it would quarantine the static electricity. I mean, so you could call it a Van de Graaff generator. I mean, there's so many different names that we could put on it because it did or does so many different things. Even to this day, if we were to knock that wooden structure off the top of the structure, within a few days, the outside of the structure would become a big Van de Graaff generator. And then if they allowed, if it's like, July 4th, let's not say July 4th, let's say Christmas 2024, they on Thanksgiving they knock the little statue off the top of it, or let's just say Halloween, because Thanksgiving is only a US thing. If we knock the top of that off there on October 31st, Halloween, somebody goes up there mischief night, knocks that off, and then Christmas, Samhain or whatever it is, Samhain, whatever the pagan holiday is, we climb up to the top of the structure. As we're climbing up, our hair is going to start standing on end because we're standing on the top of a Van de Graaff generator. And if we get up there, somebody, let's say you take somebody tall like Shaq O'Neal, he goes up there and he takes a hockey stick and he holds it up in the air. That hockey stick is going to start venting static electricity because he's going to become the antenna. And the static electricity, which is quarantined to the structure, is going to start venting through him up into the ether, up into the air. Nature's going to do that all by itself. You don't have to do anything. There's no magic. There's no sonic oscillators or vibrating thises or magic carpets or arcs of the covenant or any of that. That's just nature. And this is something that, because static electricity was not commonplace, again, we didn't really start getting into static electricity into the late, I think it was late 1600s when Faraday started rubbing glass rods with damp cloth to create static electricity. Even electricity itself wasn't really around into the mid 1800s when we started playing with batteries and electric cars and doing things of that. And even commonplace, the average farmer didn't deal with electricity until the mid 1900s. Before that, they were perfectly happy with their bulls pulling plows and plowing the fields. They weren't even using diesel engines. They weren't using anything. It was all nature. Well, so to try to explain what we today, everyone who does laundry and uses anti-static cloth when they put it in their laundry, knows static exists. In the 1800s, people didn't all know static existed. People didn't know what electricity was. It's hard to explain something. Even heavy water, we didn't even know what heavy water was until the early 1900s, supposedly. 1920, 1930 is when we discovered heavy water. I mean, these are all much more current discoveries, which was why this could not be explained or even thought of, or it wouldn't even come to somebody's mind because they didn't have the knowledge to understand what was occurring within the structure. I don't know. I mean, you could say whatever the goal, whatever this produced, whatever the harvest was, I can't tell you if it was used for good or bad. I mean, electricity itself could be used for good and bad. You can electrocute someone, or you could turn on a light bulb so people could read the Bible. So what they utilized it for, I can't say. Well, I do know, I feel they had electrolysis. So you look at some of the artwork and some of the jewelry, even from the Egyptian times, shows evidence of electroplating, something that we did not want to admit until like this last half century. They said that they would bang it with stones and do things of that nature. So I can't tell if it was good or bad. Give me a moment. I have to take a break. I'll be right back. Something just came up. Give me 2 minutes. All right. So you're asking about this down here. Let me pull that up to the screen. And what I feel that this down here is, I think that goes into communication, that they're showing you, trying, that goes into showing the elevations of what's occurring either inside the structure or in relevance to the other structures on the plateau. Again, we'd have to mark that elevation right there, any of these elevations, and see how they relate to things either inside this structure or inside the other structures. At the time the structures were being constructed, I'm sure they had to have a way to relate different elevations between the structures. Otherwise, if you have a pool on this side of your yard, and you have a well on this side of your yard, if you're going to put a hose between them, you need to know the elevations in order to make sure your siphoning will work between them. And or since they're all connected together, I feel all three pools are connected together when we, as I was pointing out to you the other time, on the easier to show you on the map. When we look at the map and we get it out of the map mode, come on, hit the X. All right over on this side of the Great Giza Pyramid, which would be the east side, there is this hole there. I think that is where all three of the pools joined together. And what was occurring is within the pools of water, within all three of the pools of all three structures that surrounded them. And again, they're at different elevations. So ground level here is there, and ground level here is up there. However, the surface of the waters would all be the same until, as time goes, this water in this pool keeps getting heavier and heavier, working its way to deuterium oxide instead of hydrogen oxide, which is what we call tap water, whatever you want to call it. This water will become more dense and more heavy, so hence the elevation of the surface of this would work its way lower. And as it worked its way lower, because it's heavier, it wouldn't go anywhere because of how they're all pooled together. I guess the best way to explain that is if you had two pools of water and you join them together with a conduit, and you pour mercury into there, okay, boom, mercury. Now you add just water to the top of here. The mercury here is going to rise up a little, but because this mercury is so heavy, the water is actually going to rise higher. The elevation of the surface of the water is going to be higher than the elevation of the surface of the mercury because of the density of the liquids. Can you visualize that? Well, I believe that one of my favorite ones, which is this one, I'll pull it up real quick. No, missed it. Hang on a second. I got to get the guy to fall in the right spot. I think I got it. No, missed it again. Hang on. This is a pain in the neck to get onto. They've made it harder and harder. It's this dot right there. Boom. Okay. Here we're inside that structure. Okay. We're inside that you can't, they won't let you in there anymore. There are certain areas that they've made off limits. I could understand somebody falls into there. Maybe you get two kids in here doing things they shouldn't be doing, a couple of kids smoking reefer, you know, something like that. Out of sight, out of mind, because you're where you can't, people can't visually see you. People obviously graffiti, you know, things that they don't want done. So they have, you can't get into here anymore. So I thank goodness that this already existed. Now, one thing I was noticing the other day, this mark up here, if you had to picture this as a pool of water and these being two different pistons, I think this again is another image of some sort of communication. Now, when I say communication, they visually put things that were occurring into the structure. So you can see elevations, you can see how the water level here coincides with that top brick. The water level here coincides with that. And then you have another water level you can clearly see here that coincides with this thin layer right here where there's this thin step. Now, I didn't put those water levels there, and I didn't put the breaks there, and I obviously didn't put this stepped thing here. But I would put money that if you measured these and you took, like I said, you took elevation readings of how many feet above sea level this is, and then you compared that to the markings on the outsides of the structures and even the markings in front of the one we were just looking at, this guy here, that some of those are going to marry to the millimeter because they're marking and notating different elevations. And I think those elevations that they're marking and notating are going to be the water levels from inside the structure. Just like this right here, this step, which, where's that? I have a green image, if I can find it really quickly. I know it's green. I think they are just as they were. Again, if there were a level of sheetrock or gold or anything else on the outside of the structure, then the difference in coarseness of the elevations would become non sequitur. Here we go. This is what I was looking for. This right here, you can see these steps. Those steps in elevation, when you it's not scrolling up to where I want it to be. It's hard to see right down here. These steps that are in there, okay, they correlate to the elevations in the Great Giza Pyramid. Though that the base level here where it says the word chamber is at the same elevation as this right here. Now, this is not to say that the guts inside the pyramid only take up the bottom 20% of the structure. The shafts that go to the edge, which they show here, go out at a slight angle. They actually go up at a very steep angle. And where they touch the outside of the pyramid is the elevation of the top of this structure. The top of this is where these touch the surface. I believe, and again, the only way to accurately verify this is if someone were to take one of your cell phones that show elevation and note each of these elevations and see where it compares to these elevations within the structure. And I think you'll find probably to the millimeter that they marry up because they were visually documenting different elevations that occur within the structure on the outside of the structure. Well, that's what I was starting to get into here. this one would be the norm, the average. On an average day, if you have a tree in the middle of the woods, let's start with a new piece of paper. You have a tree in the middle of the woods. Okay. The amount of static electricity that is around that tree is going to be whatever it's going to be. We'll just call that amount of static electricity that's ambient on that particular tree, X. Now, if you were to take another tree next to it and you somehow, let's put an antenna on the top of it, okay? It's going to take the static on there and vent that static electricity off into the ether. So this one would be negative or less, actually, technically the way we look at it, since it has the ability to accept electrons more, they technically call that positive. The positive side of the battery is the one that has less electrons. So that would be positive in comparison to this. Now, if we take another tree over here and we put it on the top, say on the ground, only here we isolate it from being able to vent static electricity to ground. Somehow we put it in a planter and we put it on a big rubber mat, okay? The amount of static electricity on here would be actually greater than the static electricity on here, which had the ability to vent off into nature naturally. Here, it's going to be greater than, or if we were looking at it electronically, it would be negative since it has extra electrons. So this would be negative in comparison to this. This would be positive in comparison to this. And this would be way positive in comparison to that. So this is what you're playing with. This is the norm. And when you're dealing with something, I believe what they were doing is taking this abundance of static electricity and either combining it with the elements or tapping it itself. But it wants to go to ground, which is the Osiris shaft. You're taking it, and between the differences, that's what the Queen's chamber is doing. Between the differences between the one that shorts to the building 7 or the third pyramid and this one, which I believe shorts to the Osiris shaft, nature wants to go to ground. But because of the way the niche is slightly off center, it's closer to this conduit, and this conduit is about 6 inches closer to the niche, in addition to the niche being off center. The static electricity, which uses the niche kind of as an antenna, we kind of discussed that when I was talking about how the water would drip in there. It shoots to here because the electricity likes the path of least resistance. All electricity does. It can't generate enough energy to jump to that conduit, but it can generate enough energy to jump to that conduit. And you're tricking it to go to the lesser, this being the ultimate goal. It builds up enough potential energy to almost jump to there, but you give it a shorter path to short to this structure. And I do think it's actually done within the elements, like the energy is used to create another compound. And I don't know if that compound is something we do have in our periodic table or not. Like I said, your normal periodic table you look at actually looks just like that right there. I keep one with me all the time. That's your normal, every day you see it in high school, periodic table. But the real periodic table kind of has hydrogen, deuterium, and tritium. Then you have the formation, the niche in the wall. Well, the Great Pyramid would be the one that has the most buildup of static electricity. It is kept from venting out into the atmosphere, up into the ether, whatever you want to call it, because it doesn't have a capstone. It is truncated at the top. It's quarantined to the top of the structure because of the exterior configuration, how we already looked at how it's stepped, how it has a sweeping pattern that's going to push the static electricity up to the top 1/3 of the structure. Up to, if we're looking at this one, it's going to push it to the top third of the structure up here. And that is where it is pulled into the system, and it's pulled into the system on this side. And it's done that way because in here, when oxygen and hydrogen burn together, it's going to create a bit of steam, moisture, water vapors. Those water vapors, I didn't get into, let me really quickly find I didn't expand on this yet. Like I said, it's complex, but it's all right there. Where do I have? Dang it. I don't believe I don't have. There is a. Again, some things I put an image in here and Google decides to take it away from me from time to time. In the Great Pyramid, you've got the King's Chamber, which is actually really tall like that. You've got the antechamber, which is like that. And then it comes over to the Grand Gallery, which actually kind of like that. Then you got the niche there. And actually, sorry, the Grand Gallery comes at this angle and then comes down. The conduit comes out of here at the same elevation as that. About 1/3 of the way into this, it starts bending up, and it comes up and then proceeds to the surface of the structure, where it doesn't breach the structure, but goes to the surface of the structure. Just imagine in here, where we've got the opening in the wall, we already discussed how it's got that funnel shape. The water level in here, I feel, is going to be right at the level of the entrance. It's going to be, the water level is going to be right at where the line is. You can, they cleaned the wall, but prior to that, you look at older pictures from the 1800s, you could also see a water level within the Great Giza Pyramid. I'm trying to find a picture of the King's Chamber really quick, because again, pictures are, you know what, I have these pictures. These pictures will show it. Here we go. Oh, this is the one I was trying to show you. This one right here, this gentleman is sitting in the shaft, which is right here. I showed you the gate that they currently have something else in front of it, but this right here, that right there, okay, goes into an area of the pyramid they don't like to talk about. That area of the pyramid is actually down this hallway right here, the door being here. Again, this gentleman, Charles Brown, was in there in the late 1990s before they closed it at the turn of the century, and they spent 3 years cleaning it up and doing repairs. I don't know if you know about that, but we decided in the late 1990s to close it down and spend 3 years cleaning it up before they reopened it in 2001. But either case, this gentleman went in there, and he had one of his friends take a 2,000 candle watt flashlight and shine light into this conduit, which is the north conduit out of the Great Giza Pyramid, out of the King's Chamber. And he was able to see, in fact, what he's holding right there is a little compact mirror, like you use for putting on your makeup and stuff like that, so that the cameraman, which was in the hallway, could see the light. That's what you see. When he shined the light into there, there was enough light going through that you could see the illumination, enough that that compact mirror was able to reflect it back so he could take a picture of it, documenting that this conduit, which goes up, has a shaft which comes down to join there. And what is occurring is in here where the hydrogen oxygen is burning back together, or the new oxygen from outside, because the other oxygen is vented out of that shaft down there. The hydrogen is brought up where it's brought into the top, brought around the back, comes in through the pits. That's a flashback arrestor and bubbles up through the water into here where it's burnt back together with the oxygen from there. The water level, when it rises, chokes it off. When it lowers, opens it up. So it controls the burn. It's not just wildly going out of. Well, I do believe there was actually combustion occurring. You had the hydrogen bubbling up through the water, which is joining with the oxygen coming in from the outside, burning right in this area, which is why there's scarring on the top of the thing. We already saw that picture where you can see burn marks up there. This is where the hydrogen and oxygen were burning back together. The reason that Chris Dunn and many others find evidence of explosions in the Grand Gallery in the King's Chamber is because every now and then this would burn out. Either not enough oxygen would get in there, or for whatever reason, it would burn out. And just like when your furnace turns on, either your hot water heater or your furnace, when it first ignites, gas comes into the room, and then it sparks, and then there's an explosion, and then after that explosion, there's a controlled burn. It has to first ignite, and then it's controlled burn. Even in when you turn on the gas at your stove, you turn on the gas and you light the gas, there's boom, and then there's a controlled burn. Well, every now and then that controlled burn would go out. When that controlled burn would go out, the shape of it, how it has the spot that comes out, that would reignite a spark between there and the edge of the wall in the perfect spot, so that the gases would then start to burn together. When that first kicks in, there's going to be an explosion. It's uncontrolled. There's going to be an explosion as the gases consume themselves and turn into water. And then after the gases consume themselves, the additional hydrogen that's bubbling up and the additional oxygen that's coming in become a controlled burn. And the way the system is maintained is when there's too much burning, the water level will rise, which will choke off the oxygen supply. And when the water level recedes, more oxygen will come in, feeding it. So it controls its own. However, when all this is occurring, I can't answer that question. That's speculation, and I don't think anybody would make. Right. Yes. Well, that's a completely different structure, and I do believe they were using dirigibles. I do not believe that they weren't using dirigibles, whether they were using hydrogen like the Hindenburg, or whether they were using helium like the ones NASA use out of the the Antarctic to this day. I don't know which one of them they were, or maybe they were using levitation using a form that we haven't fathomed yet. But I do believe that was some sort of an airport. And I don't think anyone really makes gases. We quarantine and separate them. The gases exist in nature. So nothing, it's like anything else. The energy is not lost or destroyed. It's manipulated and moved and utilized. So in this particular, let me get back to what's going on here. When you burn hydrogen and oxygen together, you're going to get heat and you're going to get water vapor. That water vapor, because the only exit out of here, because of the way and I do feel, in order for this to work, where the boss mark is right here, that either continued all the way down or there was another. Either way, they say they when they broke into this, the story is they had to break their way into here. So I do feel there was more construction in this antechamber area than there currently is, definitely, because they broke their way in. And I do feel at this time that some part of it would have pooled off this water. And this water is the only pooling of this water. If the water didn't pool, nothing else works. But if this water was pooled, the water level would choke off and maintain the burn. While all this is occurring, the gases in here are going to make some pressure. And that pressure needs a way out. And that way out is going to be, partially it's going to be a backflow this way, and partially it's going to be a flow of gases through here. These gases are going to come up this conduit, are going to eventually condensate, cool, condensate, and come back down. When they come back down, because of the way this is shaped, and again, I think it was the late 80s, we sent robots up the two shafts that come out of the Queen's chamber and out of the two shafts that come out of the King's chamber. There was a magazine called Omni that actually documented these. I can't find a copy of that magazine, even though I remember seeing it when I was a kid, when I was in my teens. I can't find a copy of it now, and they only show pictures of the conduits coming out of the area that I like to call the Queen's chamber. They never document the pictures out of here. They're like gone. They don't even talk about them anymore. You know, it's kind of like you know, the presidents before George Washington. We had 7 presidents before George Washington, when after we signed the Declaration of Independence and before we actually had the Constitution, we have the Articles of Confederation. That area of our history, they don't even teach us in school. It's out of sight, out of mind. They don't talk about it. It's like the first wife your dad had before, you know, that spawned your brother and sister that don't, you know, that your dad doesn't talk about because it was from the other marriage, you know, type scenario. But either way, let's focus on the system. Gases would come up, condensate, or vapor would come up, condensate, run back down, come down through this shaft into this area right here, where they would actually pool right here. You can see the pool. And then from there, they would work their way across, down and out of the system, down that funnel, into the center of the Grand Gallery, down and into the lower section. We can follow it, but you can also see here, this is the shaft, the King's shaft. You see how there's a lip right here. This would also pull liquids that condensated in this area before this opening, pull them back in, drip into the room, and then, like I showed you the other day, and I keep referencing the other day because we were talking about this, fall into, let me see if I can find it really quick. And again, see, I didn't make any of these pictures, but they do exist. And it is pieces, parts, configurations of the structure that they don't like to discuss because they don't make any sense. This area right here is under that corner where I tell you there's a piece of metal. This is showing the grate that I had showed you right next to the King's chamber. The hypothetical sarcophagus is up here, and then the King's chamber is all above it. This is that one area below the floor in the corner, and to the one side of it, that grate being right up here above us, this is looking down into it, you see this channel right here. This channel worked its way up and came right below where the conduit comes in to the King's chamber from this. So any condensation that would occur prior to this, because this condensation would come down and fall into here. This condensation would come down that side channel, fall, and go into this hole. Why? I don't exactly know. However, doesn't mean it didn't occur, because right here you can see the channel. You can see where it worked its way down there. All this ashes and stuff, that's because people made fires in there current day. None of that is from, you know, and this picture was taken in 1997, just before they closed it for the repairs. This right here is the area that was an open hole. And this right here is the wall I was talking to you about the other day, that when I saw that, I saw brickwork. I saw brickwork, and I said, that must be current day construction, not from days of past. And then I saw the video from that 18-year-old that we just looked at earlier today, where I showed you the brick on the surface of the structure. And I said, oh, they did have brick during the construction of the structure. Therefore, this brick may have been from the time of the construction of the structure and not current day retrofitting. You know, with the way our history has been altered, it could be 400 years old and our history is bunk as we know it. Or it could be 10,000 years old. I don't have that answer because I can't trust our history. However, physics, logic, physical science I can trust, and knowing that water vapor will condensate and run down, and if you just took a a gallon of water and poured it in here and just follow it go down the system, pools into that one section I showed you. I didn't make that up either. There, where it pools, you can see there's a hole in the. Let me pull that back up again. And I would love to have this guy's original photos so that you could actually zoom in it. But right here, there's a hole that's maybe 4 or 5 inches deep. Not very deep, but there is a hole right there, a little dimple. And then from there, there's a little channel that runs down the center of the hallway out into the hallway that goes between the Grand Gallery and the King's Chamber. In addition to that, something I scrolled across really fast when we were looking at the pictures, there is a little step. It's I think 1/4 of an inch, and I'm going to find it really quick here. Really quick being a relative term. Hang on. I wish you could point at my screen. I wish there was a way I could share. Hang on. Let me find the picture I'm looking for, and then you can. There it is. That little step right there. Behind this is the King's Chamber, the hallway that goes to the King's Chamber, and this right here is the path that comes to the Grand Gallery, and that hole that we were just looking down is to the side of it. So the liquid that came out of there would not be able to work its way back into the King's Chamber because of this 25 millimeter step. Okay. They had a lot more knowledge of physical science at the time of this construction than we did just a century ago. And they may have knowledge of compounds and things, how things work, than we do current day. I don't know if you've watched it, but there's a TED Talk with this girl. I think she's from like Spain or something like that. Very bubbly. She's on. Oh man, here you gotta. It's a visual thing. She talks like this. She's very bubbly, and when she does it, she talks about the 74 states of water, 74 different vibrational states and patterns that water makes. She talks about that, and she's only talking about 74 different states, vibrational states of water, of light water. She doesn't even talk about heavy water, doesn't even get into deuterium. And all the different states of water she's working with are all at standard pressure, a beaker sitting on a shelf pressure. I'm sure there are way more than 74 states of water when you take into different pressures, when you put it into a vacuum. I'm sorry? Well, alchemy is changing technically. Alchemy is changing things from one element to another element, like lead to gold. I can't swear they were doing alchemy. However, ironically enough, just the other day I was watching a documentary on how we just made a really cool. Let's see if I can show you this. How I can show you something. Oh no. I know. Not only that, but I'm getting text messages from people who say they need help. Hang on. I don't want to do a month of premium. My phone is asking me so many questions. I'm trying to find. I was looking at this thing on my YouTube just earlier today. Is that it now? Hang on. There it is. Right here.
When I say cereal, you say dinner.
After this commercial. Another commercial. Okay. These guys are taking helium and deuterium. They're focusing on helium and deuterium, and they are taking these two gases, and this is happening, it sounds like somewhere in the US. I'm sorry. I watch all my documentaries in double speed. That way it takes less time. So let me just slow this down.
Reactors like the massive ITER reactor being built in France now.
The ITER one in France, they take a donut shape and they're spinning stuff around this donut shape and having it collide together like we do the Large Hadron Collider. And that is, they're trying to make a fusion reactor. This particular one that I think, I didn't actually listen to where it occurs.
The images you are seeing right now,
but this will probably tell us.
Secret for years. This is the first time footage of this technology has been shared publicly. A technology that has the potential to change the...
Yeah, I don't think they tell you where it is because it's probably some super secret squirrel thing. But what they're doing is they're taking plasma on two sides and smashing it together in the center. And they're doing this using deuterium and hydrogen. And what they're getting out of it is a reaction where the hydrogen is releasing a new, the deuterium is releasing a neutron, joining with the helium and making helium-3. And I briefly discussed that when I was talking to you the other day, and that's where I was getting into with the periodic table. You got helium, you got hydrogen, deuterium, tritium, you got helium, He, and then you got helium-3, and then you got lithium, and then you got another version of lithium, which has an extra neutron. Then you got whatever the next thing on the periodical table is, whatever the fourth thing, I don't know its name. But the periodic table is bigger than just the squares we look at, because each one of those squares just represents the base element, when really each one of those elements has different versions of the elements, depending on how many extra neutrons we give it, or how we move the protons around. So there may be other elements that we have not yet stumbled across because they're not what we like to call stable. They may disappear so fast that we haven't actually had the time to bottle it up and give it a name. But if you take the right environment, you can take the right environment, the right pressure, the right density, the right temperature, all that other stuff, you can create even things that are unstable, like tritium, to become stable. These are things that only in current day, the last half a century, we really have been learning and discovering. So this particular structure may be utilizing elements and compounds that we ourselves today don't even really recognize because they don't have the right environment. This structure is creating a less dense, a less than normal atmosphere within the structure, because you're getting condensation within the structure. So the pressures on the outside of the structure, natural pressures that we live in every day, the pressures in the structure are actually less than the pressures outside. So you can call this a vacuum, but it's not like a vacuum like you walk in there and you're going to blow up like like a balloon. But I'm sure probably going to get dizzy. Not only that, but it's going to be very unhospitable to humans because you've got steam and other things occurring within here that I haven't even discussed yet, but are pretty evident when you follow the entire system. But this one here has a less dense atmosphere, a vacuum of some sort. This one here, I feel the pressures are higher, and this one is going to be your normal pressures. And what you're doing is the elements in here want to go to here, but are forced to go to here because this is a step it can't take. It can't make its way to there because they're a higher density, and or the the energy level, the static, the energy level is pushing it away. Like, it wasn't just a what? No, no, no. They were not amateurs. They had a very good understanding of elements and features of nature that we ourselves are just stumbling across. The video I just showed you, this is a current day thing. This is only happening within the past like 5-10 years. The Large Hadron Collider in France, that's only what, a decade or two old? It's not very old. The one they're building, ITER, which is I forget what it stands for, but that's the one that's the donut shape, and it's in France. That is a current day. They're still building that to this day. They haven't even really turned it on yet. These are things that we are just learning today, and I'm sure after they've run this thing for a decade or so, they'll get a learning curve to find better ways to build it or more efficient ways to build it, and this will become something of the past, like how we used to enrich uranium, and now we do it a different way because we found more efficient ways as we learn quirks about the elements that we are working with, elements and compounds. Yeah, I think we're rediscovering things that already used to exist. Yes. And I think this structure really shows us how advanced the population or the civilization of history was in comparison to what we know today. And there's no way anyone, no matter how much LSD acid you give me or brainwashing, is going to ever make me think that this was a tomb. I am so far beyond thinking that this thing was a tomb. I'm also so far beyond thinking there were any casing stones or anything on there, because as soon as you put casing stones, that completely negates the structure on the outside. If I had a really surf structure, a sandpaper, I take sandpaper and then I put wax on the top of it, now make it all smooth, it negates the purpose of sandpaper. It was particularly shaped the way it was shaped to do what it does to this current day. Like I said, if we take this wooden antenna and we kick it off the top, let's do that Halloween on the day that you're supposed to go out and do mischief night. On mischief night, let's get half a dozen people to climb up there, half a dozen, that way you can't throw them all in jail. Let's send 100 people up there, that way you can't send them all in jail. We take that wooden structure, we throw it off the top. That's all they do. It's the only thing they do. And then we wait until Christmas Day, Samhain, and we climb up there. You're going to be standing on the top of a Van de Graaff generator. Just that itself should show you that these people had an understanding of the elements around us. That's something we couldn't do that 100 years ago. We could today. That could be rebuilt. In fact, I really feel that things like the Tesla Tower were utilizing like principles. Again, something that even 50 years ago when they had the Tesla Tower, 75 years ago when they had the Tesla Tower, people couldn't vision it. They didn't understand what they were looking at. They could see Tesla doing funky things with electricity and throwing sparks from his fingers, but they don't understand it. They didn't understand what they were doing. They look at him and say, oh, he's doing hocus pocus magic stuff. Well, I didn't expand as much. It's hard to talk to somebody about something without giving them the basis behind it. Like if I walked up to an average kid and said, you take a newborn and tell them that electricity comes out of the wall socket and makes a fan spin, they're not going to be able to visualize the electrons going around the coils in the motor and making the fan spin, how it works. That takes time of doing baby steps, like maybe just moving a magnet across a table with another magnet, and then explaining how things work before you can get into how a motor works. I mean, even to this day, a lot of people don't understand how dynamos work and how magnets work and how generators work. In fact, one of our, I say our, one of the people that represent our White House who talks about green energy, when she was asked in a press conference, but where does the electricity come from? She said, the wall socket. That doesn't mean where it comes from. It comes from the power generating plant 100 miles away that's either playing with nuclear power or burning coal energy. It doesn't just come from the wall socket magically. But people don't understand that. In fact, a lot of people don't understand that their electric cars are either nuclear powered cars or coal powered cars, because the electricity has to be generated somehow. It doesn't just magically come from a wall socket. But you can't start a conversation without giving the whole background of it. And I feel that nothing I'm saying is hocus pocus or out of place. Nothing I'm saying is magic. Nothing I'm saying is you have to believe. Almost everything I say I can document. Like I showed you the Van de Graaff generator with the long-haired blonde girl touching it and her hair stands up on end. Because it's documentable. These things occur. But people don't understand how or why it's occurring, but you can show it occurs. You can show that when she reaches out and touches the Van de Graaff generator, that has the coil in there, she reaches out and touches it, her hair stands on end because the static electricity goes down the surface of her skin, and because she's probably wearing rubber shoes, it can't short to ground, therefore it shorts to the air around her. Yeah, let's do a little bit later on. Right now, I keep getting text messages from somebody who needs to talk to me. So I kind of want to address what that problem is, and I'll get back to you. I can either do it maybe half an hour, or do you want to do it another day? All right. Now this thing is, I've kind of touched different areas of it. I think this is why I'd like to eventually build some kind of a working model. Because when people can visualize at least the movements of the water, we can then later get into the pressures of the water, or whether the water's hot or cold, or whether the water has an abundance of static electricity, or it's grounded. I mean, well, being that I believe it was fed from the Nile, the only real water source in the area, that would mean it was fresh water. However, it has been said, and I do not completely dismiss it, that there was salt caked onto the walls of at least the Queen's Chamber. And I'm sure you know that if you put like a pinch of salt in water, it helps it boil a little bit quicker. If you put a pinch of salt into your evaporator, it helps the water. Well, I don't think the water came into the system salty. I think the salt was in the system. Just like if you, I'm sure over in the UK, when you get sick, you turn on an evaporator that throws a mist of water into the air, so you're breathing in warm, moist air. Do you have those, like a medi pot? You put yourself over a medi pot and you breathe steam. Okay. Well, the medi pot you kind of put hot water into, but they have, and I could pull it up on Amazon, where they just take very simply a chamber of water, and you drop a little thing into there that agitates the water, or boils it, pulls it up, and blows out steam. Well, all you put into the water is a pinch, just a pinch, like you would into like your soup, just a pinch of salt, just enough so that the water helps electrolyze and or boil just that much quicker, just that much more efficiently. If you have distilled water and you put 2 leads into it, you're not going to get a lot electrolysis because there's nothing for the electricity to flow through. Water itself is a pretty good insulator. That doesn't mean I recommend that if there's a pool of water, you shove your finger into a light socket and stand in a puddle. But because most of our water has impurities, chlorine, fluoride, other impurities in it, our water coming out of the tap is far from distilled water, far from filtered water. It has impurities. It's the impurities that allow the conductivity in the water. And by putting a pinch of salt into the water, it allows a little bit more conductivity. It ensures that there's impurities in there to allow the conductivity. So I do not dismiss that there may have been, of course, I've never been to the Great Giza Pyramid, but they say there was salt caked on the walls of the Queen's Chamber at the time. And I do not dismiss, because that area is where I feel there was a lot of static electricity that initially was on the surface of all the water vapor in that room. And as the water vapor starts to cool and collect and become water droplets, those water droplets cake to the side of the Queen's Chamber and drip down into the Queen's Chamber, that the salt remains when the water condensates on the wall and works its way down. That salt is the impurity that helps the static electricity in that room be more conductive. And I do feel that's the perfect place for it. So when I hear that there was hypothetically salt on the walls of the Queen's Chamber, caked onto the walls, I don't dismiss it, and I include it into my model, and it fits in there very well. Without that salt being in there, there'd be that slightly less conductivity, and the reaction would occur less. But when you picture salty water in that room, or salt caked onto the walls, and you take the whole picture of the system as I feel it to be, that's the perfect place for the salt to be. If you had salt in the King's Chamber, it ain't going to be doing anything. Salt in the Grand Gallery ain't going to be doing anything. Salt in the subterranean chamber ain't going to be doing anything. In that room is the perfect place, because that's where all the static electricity is building up. As the vapors condensate, they take on less surface area, so that the static electricity has less surface area to ride on. And that static electricity is looking for a home. And it's going to take the path of least resistance, which I feel is the south conduit, which some way, either directly or indirectly, shorts itself to the third structure, or the one I like to call Building 7. And one other thing, I'm going to find this picture. I just had it before and I meant to talk about it, but I didn't, is when you look at the 2 conduits, and again, they've done patch and repair work, like I said, in the late 1990s. And now that I'm looking for it, I can't find it. I know where it is. Give me 1 second. Here it is. You're looking at it on the other screen right now. All right. This is labeled incorrectly. And again, this is from 1978, so well before the repair work. This, although it says north, is the southern shaft. And this one that says south is actually the northern shaft. These are labeled incorrectly. The arrows go to the right spots, but the labels are incorrect. And you can tell, because this is the south of the structure and this is the north of the structure. So the one that says south is pointing to the north of the structure. You can see right here this crack. And that crack, to my knowledge, because there are pictures from the 1800s that I don't have a copy of right now at my disposal, came across and kind of looked like an arc right through there. And this was solid in the 1800s. We drilled through there after a person in there saw that crack and worked his way through the crack into the wall to find the void behind it, and then cut it out to find the conduit. And then they used some sonar and banging on the wall with a piton hammer and stuff like that till they found the conduit on the other side, which they then drilled through to find that conduit. But at the time in its heyday, both of these were smooth covered walls, and the only imperfections in this one wall was the crack. And I feel that crack is the evidence of, over time, the static electricity arcing through the wall. Static electricity doesn't care. It'll go through 5 inches of rock to the conduit behind it. And I'm gambling that that conduit was at the time a hydrogen conduit that worked its way all the way to the structure I call the building 7, or the third structure on the plateau. That is where the energy, whether it was an occasional spark that just worked its way through there and not actually tapping the electricity, but the gases and or liquids within that room were actually the harvest that they were trying to get. And the fact that the static electricity existed and needed a conduit to relieve itself is why there was that crack in the wall. And again, in the 1800s, before we had a real understanding of electricity, then that crack in the wall didn't mean anything to anybody. If like I showed you the video the other day of a power plant arcing. Hang on. Arcing transformer. Right here, okay? Just imagine this spark that you're going to see here going through a wall. It doesn't care about 5-inch brick wall. Look at that. Look at that energy right there. Look at that energy. It doesn't care about a 5-inch wall. It doesn't care about 8 feet of air right there. It is arcing between one side and the other, and it is nature trying to equalize, to go to neutral. That's all energy cares about, is going to neutral. It doesn't care about 5 inches of rock. Here's a. But again, in the 1800s, when we were in there, we'd had no idea what another commercial, what the power of energy had. You didn't have Tesla out there playing with the electricity. So who could fathom what you're staring at right there in the 1800s? That amount of electricity didn't exist until probably the early 1900s. I mean, I'd have to Google it, but when did we start playing with like a 115 2 volts of power? When did we actually get what we call high energy power lines? You know, the highways that we use today, before they step down to, what do you guys use over there? 220 at 50 hertz. Here we use 110 at 60 hertz. Either way, that amount of power, they were still using DC power. They were still using arc lights, which uses DC power. And the fact the arc light utilizes that particular technology right there, because you have, you know, the way the arc light works, it's very simple. It's what it says. You have lead 1, lead 2, and you're arcing between the two of them. And that arc is creating that right there, only on a controlled scale. And you put it inside a light bulb, and that's your street light. What was your question? Well, this is why I'd like to model it. I don't really feel that they were taking a arc of electricity and running it all the way to the 7th building, or building 7, the third pyramid, the third largest of the pyramids on the Giza Plateau. I think that the energy was used to create a compound, whether it be helium-3, whether it be tritium, whether it be deuterium, or whether it just be helium in a higher energy state. I'm not sure until we model this, but whoever models it needs to model it focusing on it being a machine, not being a tomb. Because again, everything I've said, there's no tomb dogma involved in everything I'm suggesting. And anybody who I've ever tried to work with on this, they always fall back mentally to the tomb dogma. I do. I think, are we still on? When I lived in California, I lived in Huntington Beach, and I ventured up to UCLA. And I sat down with people in their 20s that were, you know, the people that today are probably working on nuclear physics and stuff like that. And I sat down with a couple of them in a room, and I started to talk to them about this. And I was only focusing on the Great Giza Pyramid. At the time, I did not realize that the whole plateau works in concert. I was focusing on just that one structure. And I started to build the structure, showing them what I felt things were occurring. And I never mentioned the word Giza or pyramid or anything like that. I just said, what would happen if we took this and did that and vented this out here and caused this to do that and brought it up here, burnt it back together with oxygen up here, and then ran it down here, you know, and put the stop gaps that are in there that I showed you, how it has the control valve that coming into the structure, the flow control to control the burn within the thing. And they were interested. Oh, wow, that looks pretty good. And then all of a sudden somebody said, hey, that looks kind of like the Great Giza Pyramid. And then all of a sudden it's like a bunch of deer just saw a light, and they all turned, and they're all like, oh, the Great Giza Pyramid, yeah, pharaohs and alignment with stars and kings and blah, blah, blah. And I lost them. The conversation I had just had for like 20 minutes where they were in sync with me, I lost them all. And I might as well have just walked out of the room. In fact, after about half an hour of trying to get them back on focus, I just did. I said, thanks, guys, for your time, and have a nice day. And I lost them. None of them would lose the tomb dogma and refocus on the structure as a machine. They all flipped and started talking about kings and pharaohs and star alignments and everything else that was taught to them in elementary school and in books and in all that other stuff. All that mumbo jumbo that has nothing, I feel, has nothing to do with the structure and has everything to do with the tomb dogma. And I couldn't get them back. And I gave up, and I never tried it again. I keep going because I can't not see it for what it is. I specifically, like I said, I put blinders on, and I attacked the structure as a structure, built the structure. I looked through hundreds of pictures. In fact, unfortunately, I started by looking at things like Chris Dunn's theory. I started by looking at John Cadman's theory. I started by looking at half a dozen other. The closest one I ever found that I felt even had any avenue of going the same direction I was a guy, Charles Brown, the one that I showed you the pictures where he's climbing in there. The ones he went in there in the late 1990s, and he was attacking it as if it was a machine. Now, I don't agree with the end conclusion he came to, but I don't disagree the evidence he stumbled across. I just think he put the pieces together wrong. He felt it was a laser, and he fabricated areas and ignored other parts of the structure that he didn't understand how they fit into his laser thought. Therefore, they didn't matter to him. I feel that every piece of it had a purpose. And when I model it the way I'm modeling it, every piece of it has a purpose. I'm not overlooking anything. If somebody comes up and says, hey, there's a hole in the wall right here that goes somewhere, well, that's relevant to me. Just like in this right here, you're staring at it on the other screen, okay? This room is very relevant to me. And right now, there's a hole in the wall right here. You see it? That's very relevant to me. I want to know where that goes. I also, right here, there's a hole in the wall. Okay? That hole is at an elevation just below this step, just below this thing. It's specifically, they cut this out of the way so that is there. I don't know where it goes to. I don't know if it goes outside the structure or if it goes to the top of the structure. That's relevant to me. What I would love is if somebody would go down there with like I don't want to say a smoke bomb, but like, one of those little canisters that just puts out, blue smoke or red smoke, something that wouldn't harm the structure, and blow it into that hole and see where it comes out. I would love if somebody would go into the into where you can't go anymore, into the grotto area, and the holes that are drilled into the southern wall. I would love if they could pump, some colored smoke into there and see if it comes out up in the top in the king's chamber. That would, above the king's chamber, technically. If that happens, if that smoke comes in there and it comes out the top, or somebody puts a stink bomb in there and they can smell it up in the top after a couple of minutes, or if somebody just does something like puts a fan to put a high pressure area into the grotto area, and then somebody who you're not allowed to go up there anymore anyway goes up above the king's chamber and feels a breeze coming in. This would document that there is a connection, there is a conduit between those areas that would confirm what I'm suggesting. If somebody did that and a breeze came out above the king's chamber, if somebody put something in there and a breeze came out out of the top of that, the smallest pyramid there next to the Great Giza Pyramid, if that occurred, that would document what I'm saying, and it would add more to my model of the system. I don't know where that hole goes. I don't know if it wanders down to the, eventually comes out by the Sphinx. I don't know where it goes, but I know it's there, and therefore I'm still trying to figure out where it goes. Not only by process of elimination of what makes sense, but I would really like somebody physically to go there and figure out where it goes. I don't want them to tear the structure apart, but there are things that we can do that are non-destructive to the structure that will document things. And one of the stupidest things that I think that they're talking about is that whole, a year or two ago, they said there's a less dense area above the Great Giza, above the Grand Gallery, and they want to drill holes in the wall and put through a pipe that turns into a little floating camera thing in there. I'm like, why are they considering damaging the structure, looking for something which I don't even think exists, as opposed to taking that exact same mindset and documenting the areas that they can get to? They don't have to damage anything to send a... Yeah, I know they're going with the tomb dog. That's what I'm saying. But they can take that exact same floating drone, a dirigible, or even just a drone. Just take a little drone and fly it down the well shaft and get it into the grotto area, and use one with high definition cameras and stereo thing and map the inside of that out. Just map it. I don't care if they blow through that hole right now. Just map it. Give us really good pictures of what's in there. And there's no destruction to the structure that has to be done to do that. But they don't want to, because it might dismiss the tomb dogma and might actually document how this thing was a structure, was a function. Well, I don't think in the past half century anybody has ventured into the grotto. I think the last person that got into there was a couple of college kids that went in there in the mid 1900s, before they started locking things off. And nowadays, if you tried to do that, they're going to say, hey, you're going to have to put pitons or things like that to damage it. If you climbed up there, you might do graffiti. They got upset at that one guy who pulled a little piece of rock off of the area above the king's chamber where there's the I forget what they call it. There's a marking up there, some marking that they had, and some guy took a chip of the paint to try to analyze it, and they sued the heck out of them. They don't want somebody. They don't want somebody who might damage things. Somebody might go in there and, like, Jeff was here, Bob was here, 2024, Bob was here. They don't want that. They don't want somebody damaging it. And if a person climbed into there, yes, they would have to somehow. Well, but they're the Giza Antiquities. They are allowed to modify it. They are allowed to do repairs. They're allowed to cover over the funnel and put a step. They're allowed to put stairs and handle rails and run electricity and put a fan in the hole in the wall. They're allowed to do that. They don't want you to do it. But they could. Yeah, that's it's coming from the window up there. It does. But I could spend, for I've been at this for over a decade now. I'll tell you, it was Easter. I don't know why. It was Easter 2012 that I woke up and thought to myself, after all the things I'd been looking at for like a month or two. So I probably started in the beginning of 2012. But it was Easter Day 2012 when I sat there and said, what if there was electrolysis? And I'll have to be honest with you. At first, I was wrong. Because when I first started, I thought the electrolysis was between the rock in the pit in the subterranean chamber and the rock that we discussed in the hallway of the, that's the other thing. Remember, I kept saying that the rock moved. Well, I didn't show you. There's the picture where the rock sits today. But it used to sit over here. Now it sits over there. So we moved that. You can also see we took all the dirt out from over here. There used to be dirt there. So you can't see the evidence of the of where, and I thought it was between that rock and that rock. That's where I thought the electrolysis was. And even then it would work to some degree, but it didn't fill all the pieces. And I had to correct myself as time goes on. Every time I found something that disproves my own ideas, and I'm not going to call it a theory, it's technically a hypothesis. And after it's been a hypothesis, then it becomes a theory, and then eventually it becomes a law. But, it's the other thing, scientific method. We completely dismiss that when it comes to this. Everything is the tomb theory, the tomb theory, the tomb theory. It's not a theory. It's a hypothesis, which eventually might become a law, but it won't, because there's so many holes in it. I'll go with that. Oh, here's one of the images I was looking for. Now, even this is incorrect. It's partially right, but this shape actually is a funnel shape. Again, people have done this, and as I pointed out to you the other day, I didn't mention it here and I didn't really show it. Wherever there's an oval, I believe it's showing pressure. Whenever there's a square, it's showing volume. And that goes into, again, when somebody models this particular structure and we pay attention to what pressure is where and whatever, you will see that, and there's the Grand Gallery that I was talking about, how it's got those the walls and how it falls down. And now just a picture of somebody with a little squirt bottle squirting water on here, where the water would condensate and where it would drip. And you see it's all going to drip along here, but not over at the edge and not in the center, because water drips down. Now, I think that's more relevant when we're looking at the fact that they don't want to pollute the water that's in the structure, in the canal there, because that's going to be a more dense water. It's either heavy water or just a more dense water. Maybe the meniscus on the outside, you know what a meniscus is? These are other things. I use terms that people don't even know what they are sometimes, which is why it's hard to talk to somebody when they don't know some of the terms. The meniscus is the surface of the water the bug stands on. You see a bug, it doesn't fall through the water, it kind of stands on the water. There's a surface tension to that water. We have labeled that surface tension meniscus. But I use that term with some people and they're like, I don't know what that is. So it's hard to have a real conversation with people who don't know some of the terms. It's also hard to have a conversation with people who know so much of the tomb dogma that when you try to talk to them about something, they get lost because they are visioning the tomb dogma, not reality, not what's there. They've never looked at a picture. They've only read it in a book. This is the only area down here where it touches earth. Everything else is in a limestone bath. These represent the fins. Is poor representation by this particular drawing, but that's not relevant because those were covered with rocks. They weren't functional. And as you understand more of what's within there. I'd like to slowly document to people how those fins, as they like to call them, are actually showing the pressures and elevations of certain waters within the structure and how they react with each other as one water level rises, the other one is displaced by the more dense water, which I think is heavy water. But again, modeling the structure. Yeah, the Sphinx is at a lower elevation, and that's you can even look at that on Google. You can go to Google Maps. Where is that? Where do I have Google Maps? One of these are Google Maps. There it is, this one. Okay, we exit out of that. Luckily, Google Maps, they have an option called terrain. And you look at the terrain, you can see, and even if you physically, you don't even have to physically, this doesn't really show it very well. No, the other one that I had a better picture. The one that had all the levels of elevation. It was there it is. This one right here. And even this, I don't think is 100% accurate. But you can see down here, the Sphinx is at a lower elevation. Each one of these lines, I think, represents 5 feet. So you can see between here, that would be 55 feet above, 50, 45, 30, so 40, 35, 30, 25. And so it's down here. If that's 25 and that's 60, you're talking about 35-foot difference. So the Sphinx is approximately 35 feet lower. Now you can also see that if we go back to the map, there we go, and we take our little Google guy, and let me put it into satellite view so I can see what I'm looking at. We take our little Google guy, and we just drop right about, let's say here, okay? You can see that is down. Okay, that's down. You can see that. That is up. So you can see that there is a drop in elevation. You can see it easier on some other pictures. I just randomly threw them on the ground there. But if we put it at like up here, you can see, where's the Sphinx? The Sphinx is down there. You see, that's down. That's down. And that's either up or level. I mean, it's a tiny bit up. You could also see if we move up here between the two of them, you can't really tell a little bit, but this one is at a higher elevation than this one. It almost looks like they're the same, but there's some slope here, which is why I was saying it'd be nice if somebody could like stand right there and use their cell phone and get the feet above sea level, and then stand over here and get the feet above sea level. I would like something more accurate, because when eventually I build this in a CAD and print it out on a 3D or on a plastic or I don't know what, I would like it to be as true to accurate, at least scale, as possible. I can't build it 1-to-1 because I don't have like 3 acres of ground at my disposal. But I would like to build something eventually maybe the size of like a gymnasium, because I think it's going to have to be about the size of a gymnasium in order to accurately depict functionality. I think if you make it too small, you can't see. If I had 2 bowls of water and they're sitting next to each other and one is only like 5 millimeters higher than the other, it's kind of hard to show if I put a hose between them, the water moving from one to the other. You're not going to get the same flow as if you had one pool which was like 10 feet higher than the other, then it's a lot easier to show the flow of the water downhill and stuff like that. I also think you're working with static electricity when you get things too close together, as I showed you in that one video. The static electricity it's going to do what it wants to do. You know, a couple of inches doesn't matter to static electricity. It's going to jump. You need it to be far apart so that you can actually have a difference between the two and then play with that difference. And anything in nature is, if you can get one to be more static electricity, but have more energy, more ambient static electricity than the other one, as you pull them closer together, you're going to get a spark. You know, again, something that supposedly you can't do so well in the UK is if you take and just wear socks and walk across a shaggy carpet and then touch a copper doorknob. Here in the States, you're going to get a nice spark. It hurts. That's nature. It will do that all by itself. And that is something which anybody in like Kansas can do. Anybody in Arizona can. And you want to do it in a drier area. Wherever it's nice and dry is easier than where it's damp and moist, because the dampness and moistness help negate the potential of static electricity. It's the dryness that helps the static electricity be quarantined. And even if you're in a rainy area, though, if you have a big enough difference and a big enough potential, that is energy. That's static electricity. It will do something. And I don't need sonic oscillators or magic arcs of the chariots or you know, star alignment or anything else to do that. You just need to focus on what the elements and physics will do in that particular scenario. And this is what I think a lot of people dismiss whenever you mention the word the pyramids. They always think, you know, well, the ones in South America mostly think of spiritual rituals and cutting people's hearts out, especially in Mexico, Teotihuacan and stuff like that. And when you think of the Giza pyramids, you think about pharaohs and Egyptians. And I think both of those are improper mindsets, because they've all been based off tomb dogma, which I really feel is all poppycock. The one we were just looking at, I can pull it up real quick. I think I had them right about here. Yeah. Yeah, you can see a little bit. I think this one is supposedly, it says 30 feet higher than this one. It doesn't really look it here, but then again, it's hard to really get a grasp. I think you can see a little bit here where there is a difference in elevation. I believe you can almost see where this car here, it looks like it goes downhill to here and then, you know, level here. But I'd really like to walk it and feel, am I walking uphill? I'd like to talk to somebody, really talk to somebody who's been there. Now, I'll tell you, I've had a couple of luxuries in the past decade of playing with this. I have had people contact me that were experts on lots of stuff. I had some guy call me that I spent 4 hours on the phone with him, and he told me about the dynasty of all the pharaohs and who slept with whose mother and wife and who was, you know, had whose brother killed. And, you know, it's the same thing you do with the Caesars, you know, Julius Caesar and, you know, Augustus Caesar, and, you know, so-and-so did this and Mark Antony did that and da-da-da-da-da, and married his horse and slept with his sister. I mean, that's great. And all this. And I asked him simple questions about the structures, and he's like, I don't know. I'm like, but my focus is the structures. And he's like, well, I went to college for this, and I have a master's in theology on the Egyptians. I'm like, this is all great and wonderful, but in no way is it helping me. I spoke to a guy in Canada that spent 4 years of doing a thesis on these structures. He spent 4 years in Giza. And I asked him questions on the middle structure. And he said, I don't know. I've never been in it. I'm like, you're an expert on this stuff and you've never even been in it? It's, I tell you, True. You might not. And when you look at the middle structure and how there are different elevations of areas, it's like, oh, maybe they were taller when they got here and they had to duck further when they got there. And I'm like, but why is the thing at a 30-degree angle? Who would try to walk up a 30-degree angle that has no steps and slide right back down? What type of funeral procession would do that? Well, I don't know. You don't know because it didn't happen. They were lying to you, and you spent 4 years of your college, after college, wasting money over there and wasting time over there. You're an expert. Yeah, you're an expert on a lie. It's like I'm an expert on Santa Claus. I ask people, when people start to talk to me about the Egyptian stuff, I'm like, hey, tell me, did Santa Claus have buttons that were made out of wood or metal on his suit? What did Rudolph have, like hooves, or were they flat? He's like, I don't know. What does that matter? I'm like, well, you're the one who's an expert on this stuff. Can't you realize you're an expert on a story? You're an expert on a fabrication of a story. And I feel the whole tomb dogma is a fabrication of a story. And it is hard to speak to people that don't keep going back to the tomb story, because that's what they were trained, that's what they were schooled on, that's what they took tests on, that they've watched documentaries and movies on, that's what the movies were based on. I mean, they're all based on a story which doesn't hold water. Now, I'd eventually like to figure out exactly what this does. I'd like to figure out if it harvests an element, a compound, energy, whatever it does. And unfortunately, we keep modifying the physical property on which it lies, so it's getting harder and harder to truly model it. But I do think there's enough of it there that we could get a good grasp of it. And people that would focus on it and blind themselves to the tomb dogma and just pretend they found themselves there, pretend that they just found this structure in Kansas, and pretend they're attacking it as, is it a silo for keeping the straw? Is it a windmill? I mean, what is it? And they can look at it and say, well, it's not a windmill. It's not something that we hold grains, like so many people. Oh, it was a place to hold grains. It's not a place to hold grains. If it was a place to hold grains, the whole thing would be hollow so they could hold more grains. It wouldn't be difficult to get into and difficult to get out of. It was never designed for people to be wandering around in there. It's a machine, in my opinion, and I'm going to stick to that opinion. I feel from everything that I've gone across that I was fabricated on site. Majority of it was fabricated on site. I do not believe that some of the rock may not be organic, and which means it wasn't quarried. Some of it may have been. Some of the rocks, because of their characteristics, may have been quarried, but the majority of it was fabricated. And I think the three things that document that they were fabricated, again, these are things that we didn't know about until the last half century, is supposedly in the 1980s or 1990s, when we got into x-rays and stuff, we x-rayed the rocks, and one of the things they found was air bubbles. Now, you wouldn't find air bubbles in natural rock formed by nature under thousands of pounds and hundreds of degrees and thousands of pounds. All the air bubbles would have worked their way out of it as these rocks settled, whether it was a vein of lava or something like that. As it was cooling, the air bubbles wouldn't be in there. There was somebody else who took pieces of it, when you were allowed to, and put them under an electron microscope to try to figure the orientation of the metal particulates. Now, I'll explain that because it's semi-relevant. When a rock settles, whether it be lava or whatever, and it settles and cools, fine metal particulates within the rock will orientate themselves north and south based on the magnetic pull of technically, I think it's the South Pole. The South Pole is the stronger pole, but you know, your compass points north, only because that's the point we point red. Really, it's pointing south, which is the point they paint white, and the other end just points north by default. But let's look at the fact that the fine metal particulate would orientate itself north and south as it cooled over hundreds of years, you know, doing its thing. They found when they pulled chunks of the rock that the orientation was completely scattered. There was no definitive result. It left them scratching their head. They didn't understand why, and they said, "Oh, you know," just like the Michelson-Morley experiment. They said, "Oh, must have been a failure. Let's go on and do the next thing." You know, they just scratched their heads and left it alone. When they did mass spectrum analysis, they found that there was water infused in the rock. Now, all three of these document that the rock was not formed naturally over, let's just say hundreds of years. It could have been millions of years, but let's just say hundreds of years. Let's just say a week, maybe 3 months, because it would take a little while for the fine metal particulates to orientate itself as it was forming, and then they would settle. But cement, which cures overnight or in a week, it doesn't have the time for the fine metal particulates to settle either. Cement, concrete, mortar, brick and mortar, mud, you know, adobe bricks, they all have water infused in them. When you look at them, they all have water infused. That's what cement is. Cement, if you took what cement is, the majority of cement is actually water. Even though it's hard, you fall on it, it hurts like a mother, but it's still water infused with the limestone and the aggregate. The rocks in the Great Giza Pyramid, the 3 experiments they did, the mass spectrum, which found water, I think they also did one with radio analysis where they put electricity through there to do things. But all 3 of those experiments kind of document that the rock formed quickly, it has water infused in it, and there are air bubbles. All 3 of these things would not occur if it was natural rock that you quarried out of a rock quarry. But it does and would show or be evidence of a mold. Somebody poured it and it cured. Now, you also have to look at the tomb dogma started thousands of years ago, before we really had concrete. I don't think concrete was invented until like the 1700s or something like that. Or I'm not going to say invented. Wasn't discovered. Wasn't the mixture of it wasn't really known until the last 300 centuries, 300 years, three centuries. It is something that a couple thousand years ago, when they started with the tomb dogma, they would not have known. They didn't have the tools to know that this was fabricated rock, poured rock, molded rock. And it also, the molding of the rock kind of documents why the rocks fit together so well that you can't even put a razor between them. If you poured one rock and you waited for it to cure and then poured another rock right next to it using the face of the one rock as part of the mold, that would document why you can't put a piece of paper between it, how they fit together even on uneven surfaces. They didn't chisel them out to fit together like a jigsaw puzzle. They poured one rock and then poured the rock next to it. It's like if I went to the Aswan Dam or the Hoover Dam, the Boulder, Colorado Dam, or any dam that exists on the face of the earth, face of the planet. And I said, wow, where did they quarry this big chunk of cement from? And look how well they got it so that they would fit together so smoothly. These were really intelligent people to get them to do it. Because we don't know that there are air bubbles in that cement. We don't know that the fine metal particulates are facing every which way. We don't know that there's water infused in that cement. We think that there was a cement quarry somewhere, and we chiseled these blocks of cement, brought them over there, and stacked them together to make a dam. But they didn't know at the time, and the story has just gone on and on and on. I can't say they built them before the river was there. Maybe the river was there. That's like saying that the Hoover Dam that is in Arizona, between the border of Arizona and Nevada, and supplies the electricity to California, Nevada, Las Vegas, and the water to that like 4 or 5 different states down there. That's like saying that the Hoover Dam was built before the Colorado River. The Colorado River's been there, before the Grand Canyon. In fact, supposedly the Colorado River carved the Grand Canyon, and the Hoover Dam sits in the Grand Canyon. It doesn't mean one. Obviously, we know historically that the river was there before the dam, but looking at this, you can't say that the structures came before the river was there, or that the river was there. These people, I'm not going to put it past them that they may not have built the structure, and then upriver may have moved the Nile to have it change path. We current day, in the past 100 years, have changed the path of major rivers for our own reasons. We have made lakes where lakes didn't exist. We've made rivers where rivers never existed. Current day, I don't think it'd ever be turned back on. We've done too much damage to the structure. It doesn't mean that a like type structure could not be built. And in fact, that would be one of my goals, because if a like type structure could be built that incorporates all the exact same pieces and parts and build it to a type scale model and show functionality, that would be my ultimate goal. Because if I can show functionality, that would really disprove the tomb dogma. That, it would be very hard to look at if I showed you a grill, a fireplace grill, and somebody says, "Oh, it's a coffin for babies." I said, "No, it's a grill. Look, there's a grill there. The charcoal comes here. The gas comes in there. You put a propane thing here, bubble it up, and you can cook your steak on it." "Oh no, it's a tomb for babies. I mean, it's a coffin for babies." How is it a coffin for babies? But people will see what they've been told. If I tell you it's a coffin, if I tell you the barbecue grill is a coffin for babies, you're going to think it's a coffin for babies. You're not going to think, hey, if we add propane and put a steak on there, that do nothing to make no other changes to it, it'll work. Or put a rotisserie thing on there and cook chicken. But they're not looking at it like a machine. They're really focusing on it based on the tomb dogma. And that's the part that hurts me the most, is that no one is willing to pull their head out of the sand and actually look at it as a machine. And the few that have, I feel unfortunately have fabricated, like Chris Dunn fabricated pieces that didn't exist in order to fit his theory. Everybody, you show me any theory, which I'll tell you is a hypothesis, show me anybody's idea of what this structure did, and I will show you places that they deviated from the physical structure before them, changed pieces around to fit their idea. I don't want to change pieces around. I want to know what this did. I want to reverse engineer it as it sits, not fabricate. I don't want to put a helicopter pad on top of it and say it was a landing pad for spacecraft. I want to show what it did. Period. I just want to show what it did. And it's difficult when I don't have the knowledge of what happens to some of the elements in the right conditions. And nothing can't be done with the right budget. I could build pressure chambers and document what happens with condensation of water. And for all I know, it would be wonderful if this thing actually was what we call a low energy nuclear reaction, what we used to call cold fusion. It is very possible that this thing is doing what you refer to as alchemy. It might be taking deuterium and somehow manipulating it to become hydrogen or helium, or sorry, deuterium technically is hydrogen. They may have been changing one thing to another thing. It may have been some sort of an energy source. But it also may have just been harvesting a particular gas or a particular compound. I don't know. That was what I feel. There is a conduit out of the third structure, which would be just below the water level. And I really wish I had a photograph of it. One of your guys, if we could ever get your old videos, showed me that one conduit that I really wish I'd snapped pictures of. It's on the building 7 over to the side. I'll show you where on a map. That's probably the best area. And anybody out there, in fact, Ortiz, if you're watching this, it would be great if you could give me that picture. Right over here, there is, I think it's actually kind of right up here, there is a spot on this face where, just like up here, how on the face of it there's the smooth rock. If I go right here, how there's the smooth rock. Didn't want it to move like that. How it's not smooth, and then right there it's smooth. There's a spot over on this face right over here, which I can't zoom in on, and unfortunately there's no Google guide. Oh, there is a Google guide. Maybe it'll get me what I want. I think I want to try right there. No, I'm not. Yeah, maybe. It's right down over here. Let's try if I can get there. See, right now we're like on this pyramid, I think. We're not next to it. Yeah, we're on it. There's a spot on this wall. There it is. Oh, I love it. Right there. That conduit. See how here it's smooth? It's rough and then it's smooth. There's a conduit right there. Now, he actually had a picture that was kind of looking into that. Why did it move on me? Go back to where I was. How do I go back? That's not what I wanted. I have no idea what it just did to me. Let's get back over there. That spot is where I believe they actually harvest whatever they had, whatever they were working on. The purpose of this structure, I believe, came out of that conduit right there. I believe the water level on this side would be right up to the top of those rocks, which is why I say much of this is communication in here. I'd like to figure out this level compared to that level and how that relates to the structure on the inside, which is why elevation is very important. When you're dealing with water, elevation is very important. This hole right there is what goes into the structure, and there's a spot in the structure where, get back to my drawings, it comes into the structure. You've got half a dozen rooms in here, and it goes down, and there's stuff at the lower level, and this is a pretty complex area, but there's a spot where it comes up, and then there's a step up there, and then like a little pit behind it. And if I did it in line with that, it would actually be at this elevation. So pretend that's up here instead. And that has the conduit that would come towards me, since this is the entrance, and that is on, back out of this. Why is it being mean to me? No, that's a completely different video. I lost everything I was doing. Let me get back over there. It's all right. Give me a second. I've gotten good at getting where I want to get. And we come over here. It's actually over here, isn't it? Yep. Go to satellite mode. Where are we? Over here. Get back over here. So this is the entrance right here. Okay, and it's on the north side. All right. The area in question is on the inside. There's a room that actually goes at a 90. This is the only one that doesn't have the orientation of completely north and south. when you look inside of here, and somewhere I had a really good CAD image, and I'm going to try to find it again. Here's another problem I had. I had CAD images that worked with free CAD software that I could manipulate and play with, and then they either made that software no longer free, or some of them went out of business and it doesn't even work anymore. Just like FLI files that people used to work with in the 90s, that now you can't even find something to play with them, like that dancing dinosaur and stuff like that. But either way, this has one that goes off at about, it's not a 45-degree angle, it's like a 30-degree angle, which seems to align itself with the entrance of this structure, and that may be communication. And I say communication because when the structure was built, things relate to other stuff. It's not like words, it's how things relate to other stuff. It's when you watch, if you pay attention to Carl Monk and The Code, everything relates to other stuff. That's how they communicate. Anyway, this area that I was just showing you is on the side. This opening right here is on the side of the structure. So that comes out of the area in there where that step is, and then comes to the side. And it happens at such an elevation so the water level on the outside is such, and that conduit comes out. I'm going to draw it this way, even though technically it would be coming towards you, since it would go to the west. But it would come out at an elevation where the water level is going to be here. This area is open, just open, and this comes out below water level, so that it's either a gas that's in here, or it's a liquid which seems to float above the water, lighter than water, which I don't know what it is. It could be liquid helium. I have no idea. I don't know what it is because I'm not a physicist. But it is able to be tapped out of here by probably adding a tiny bit of suction, which would drain this of water, and then the gas would easily flow. And as soon as that is removed from there, the water would then cover that hole and patch it back up to keep this gas inside the structure. You also look at when this structure is the one that has that funky shape on the outside, and that one tail that comes down, which comes down at an elevation just below the ground level. And I think that has to deal with keeping pressures so that the waters that are on the outside, this gas is trapped. It is kept within the structure, with the waters being its containment. Just look at I don't know, if you had a water jug, and to get the stuff out, you just suck on a straw and the gas would come out. As soon as you stopped sucking, the water would refill up there and would cap the gas on the inside. That gas, I feel, is pulled somehow. It is tricked out of the Great Giza Pyramid, out of the southern conduit, and quarantined within this structure. And we also may find, as time goes on, that it's not actually physically pulled out. It may be all done with pressures on the inside, that the same way we distill liquids, where if you have something under pressure, it will condensate, and whatever condensates, I'm trying to think of the best way to put this. When we make, liquid nitrogen, we have to cool it, and they just have little coils, and they put that coil in ice, and it condensates on the inside of the tube, and liquid nitrogen drips out. That liquid nitrogen is cold. It's at whatever it is, negative whatever temperature. They take that and they put it into a pool, and then you run another coil on the inside, and what condensates in there is, like, instead of being liquid nitrogen, it's like liquid helium. They take the liquid helium and they put it inside another pool, run it, and it comes out to be like liquid hydrogen. I think it's actually the verse: nitrogen, hydrogen, and then helium. I think liquid helium is cooler than liquid hydrogen. I forget which way it goes. You could Google it, but you have to have one. You have to have the cooling power of one to condense the next one. And it is potential, the way that I showed you that the queens, and it's easier to show you the picture, the one that they like to call the center structure. I believe at one point it was the Queen's Pyramid. But again, the tomb dogma changes on who exactly you ask. But this here is just below, again, just below the water level would allow that this conduit can actually breach the water. It's above the water. This is going to be below the water line. So whatever is condensing in here, it feels, based on the pressure of all the pressures of the gases within the system, that is below water level. So it may be a more dense liquid than water that's condensing within that area, and it is then pulled down to here, and which is why I said the two holes that are in the side of that are in the east wall of this area here, whether or not they actually go somewhere. That's another spot where we could pump some colored gas or something into there and see if it winds up coming out of some rock down here. If there's the myriad of conduit that litters the Giza Plateau, there's conduits all over the place below ground level. If one of them come from here and come out in there, then this liquid, which condenses, pools in here, and then if it's at an elevation that's, you put this up next to it, that may pool out of here and then spill into here. I don't know until we experiment. Now, there's one other thing I really haven't touched on this. I might as well mention it. How familiar are you with the Nazca lines?
Well,
Is way more than animals. I will suggest to you all day and all night that the blueprints for the Great Giza Pyramid are littered it's not just Nazca. They come up all the way into Peru. Where's Nazca, if I can find it real quick? Nazca. Nazca is in Peru, whatever. Okay. It goes all the way up the coast. Where are these? I think they're... What are you looking for? What are you looking for?
How are you not dying?
I am very hot in here, but I don't want to turn on the air conditioner because I'm in the middle of recording stuff and it's noisy. Then the dog comes in. It's... Give me one more moment. Here, take that one. Right here.
Okay.
There you go. I think they're on this plateau. Dang it. Let's look for monkey. I'll just look at Nazca, Peru, and monkey. Monkey spider. There we go. Bingo. These structures, these lines, there's a gentleman in Canada. His name is JD. I don't know if you're familiar with him. By the way, if you mention the word flat earth, he will hang up on you. So don't mention it. He's like, oh, I don't want to hear that stuff. And easiest if I can find, I actually have a link to his videos. But let me go to YouTube. You know what I do? I have, it's actually a quick way. Blueprint, blueprint.giza.ws. I love his website so much. I put a link to it right off my website. Bam. It's this guy here, Great Giza Pyramids Blueprints Decoded from Nazca Lines. Okay, that's the name of his thing. He runs a website called Ancient Agenda. Okay, he has found a lot of stuff. I was working with one of his employees. I'm not going to say his employees. One of his people that he was working with, who was over, I think he was in Ireland or something like that. And when you look at the Nazca lines, they map out the Great Giza Pyramid. I don't kid you on this. They go further, though. Not only do they map out the Great Giza Pyramid, they reference all three structures. They're blueprints. They reference all three structures. The way that they are designed is, you know, when you look at them here, he took the land away. You can just look at the structure. They go all the way up the coast, not just in Peru. They practically go all the way up the coast. And as it works, what happens is there are areas they have rulers and they have exploded sections. He kind of shows it on his thing where they will take a section, you know, blah, 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 they got that. And then they will show a little cutout that they show like this, a little section. And then that has a line that would come up here. And then this would be a blow up of that section. The way they do it, they show this, whatever length this is, and then whatever length that is, that's the deviation of how much they blew it up. And then they'll have more guts up here showing more stuff. Now, I haven't gone through everything because there are lots of things about the Nazca lines. Let me just mention some things to you. The Nazca lines will either have different thicknesses of lines of how they are, which shows depth. And there are sections where they will have where there's rock here, and then rock here, and then rock here. And it will look like one line when you look down upon it from above, but really it's stepping back and forth. Now, if you take each one of these and you picture them as a different color, the thicker one, let's say blue, this one will say red, and this one will say green, you will have a blueprint on top of a blueprint on top of a blueprint. And you have to pay attention not just to the line, but how thick the line is and the pattern of the line. They're not all just straight. And some of them, they're only like maybe 16, 30 feet thick. So, and this, I'm looking at Google Maps right now and they've blurred it out. It used to be way less blurry. So I can't really even get a good picture. I think somebody watched his videos and said, hey, too much stuff going on here. But when you look at the lines, and I'm trying to, here's one where you can see where right here it gets thicker. See how it gets thicker right there? You can really see a rectangle, a trapezoid. It's this shape right there, how it's thicker on, I didn't do that well. There, that shape, it's thinner on one side and thicker on the other. That is a reference point to start something, and then somewhere there's a line like off of here that would go to somewhere else to reference. From there, we're going to blow things up. These are blueprints, and they show, I don't want to lie to you, but they show the internal guts of the Giza structures. And they don't just do this area. They don't just do there. They stretch all the way up along the coast up into here. This whole area is all what you want to call Nazca lines, but they come way out of Nazca, just like that one wall that we were chasing across Europe that went for hundreds of miles. Remember, like half a decade ago on one of our chats, we were following this line that went hundreds of miles. Okay, some of these lines, they go hundreds of miles. They go up into here. I can't really see them here, but anyway. Oh yeah, you can see some right there. You can distinctly see some of the patterns and some of the lines. Now, these are getting harder to see because it looks like they blurred some of them. But one of JD's guys sat there and took all of these and used the Google overlay thing and mapped them out. The problem when he did it is he wasn't paying attention to which ones were which thickness. So yes, he mapped them all out, but they were all just snapping lines. So it's very hard to tell what is what, because you have to pay attention to the thickness of the line and the pattern of the line. Because although they put a blueprint on top of a blueprint and to fit this whole area, what I want to do when I have ubuku amounts of time, or I can find some zealous college kid, is to take those blueprints and actually try to follow them and draw them so that we can prove that those are the blueprints without a doubt that represent the structures that are in the Giza Plateau. And some of those lines might actually document and dictate where that one conduit out of that small little pyramid goes to, how the conduit out of the building 7, the third largest pyramid, if it documents that and shows it, it really is another way for me to say, look, I'm not making this stuff up. They put it in a blueprint on South America, black and white on South America. You can watch his video. It's very eye-opening is the best way I can say it. He doesn't even have to make it up. The lines are there on the plateau. If people pay attention, that's one of the marks I was talking about right there, how it shows that's where there's a key, and you take that key and somewhere there's a line that would probably come off of here and follow it up, and then it gets to another area where it has like an exploded diagram of that section, and it looks like it's about double sized from what I can see there. Some of these, they have it and it comes up way bigger because instead of double sizing it, they triple or quadruple size it when they want to zoom into something. And then you have to pay attention to the pattern of the lines, because the blueprint for the other thing might be physically on top of the other blueprint, but it's the thickness of the lines and the pattern of the lines that really dictate what lines correlate to what lines. You know, they when you just look at it, all the lines kind of blur together unless you take the time to really focus on the pattern and the thickness of the lines as to which ones are part of what drawing. And it's just something that down the road, it's one of my other goals that down the road, hopefully before I leave this mortal coil, to document. Say that one more time. There may be things like Nazca lines on the Giza Plateau itself. There's no reason, and I wish you hadn't come in the room, but your mom let you in, that there's no reason they wouldn't have some markings on there. Like I said, there's communication. These Nazca lines are communication. They're not written in a language, or they are written in a language. They're written with reference points and visual markers, and they're consistent throughout the whole system. They're consistent what marker means what, and how it zooms in or expands or you know, how exactly it does it. Now, there's some of the drawings and questions he particularly did an overlay, but on this particular video, when this gentleman was doing it, JD. What? I love you and stuff, but can't you give me go play with a ball? Go smoke a joint, jerk off, do something. All right. Well, I'm just giving you this for thought, mind thought. And this is something, like I said, that I have the file. I don't actually know how to totally use it. You have to use was it Google Maps Pro, because the Google Maps online you can't draw on and do stuff. You have to use the version of Google Maps that you download, and it has to be the paid version, I guess, because the non-paid version doesn't have features. So I'm too much of a cheapskate to buy the paid version, but I do have the file, the data file that accompanies it, that you load into there to do the overlay. And like I said, the gentleman who he wanted nothing to do with it, because after JD and I got into an argument because I mentioned the word flat earth, and he's like, I don't want to talk to you anymore. You know, I'm like, we're doing so well together. You know, I show you what I pointed out to him. And anybody who knows anything, can figure this out really quick. I was trying to open his mind to a flat Earth. I said, look, you're dealing with a structure which is accompanying the just, let's say this is the South America we were looking at, and Peru's down here. I'm like, you're looking at a structure which is like, what, 10 miles in size and stuff, and all these things are this structure. How come some of them aren't bent because of the curve of the Earth? I was trying to open his mind that the Earth is a flat thing. Otherwise, these things wouldn't marry each other if it was a curved ball. I can't take a tennis ball and draw 4 straight lines and have them be 4 straight lines. They would kind of look like this if it was a tennis ball. That's bad. This would be my 4 straight lines if I had a tennis ball, right? Because there's a curve to the sides of the tennis ball. So it wouldn't be square. It would kind of be an oblique squareoid, if you know what I mean. And I said, look, how do you have this structure on a curved plane? And he said, oh, you're one of those flat earthers. I don't want to talk to you anymore. And I'm like, dude, I support you in every way possible. Why do you want to close the door just because I'm trying to enlighten you to something? You know, you're sitting here showing me the blueprints of the Giza Plateau on the surface of the South America. And I'm just trying to tell you, you're looking at a flat drawing. You're not looking at a curved drawing. You're looking at a flat drawing. You yourself are pointing it out to me, and I'm just pointing it out to you that it's a flat drawing. And he could not fathom that. But it doesn't stop it from being true. That's the whole point. It doesn't stop it from being true. It doesn't stop it from existing. It's there. I don't think they'll ever teach you this in elementary school, because the teacher will get, anything that has to do with intelligent design, somebody's going to lose their job. But he has several videos that complement this whole discovery. And like I said, I fully endorse his findings, but he won't work with me anymore because I tried to point out to him the flatness of the blueprints he was working with. Here's what I'm talking about. How that looks like a mess. And I guess he did this. How long ago is this video? This video is only 3 years ago. So he listened to me. He listened to me in some point, because I told him to make each width of each line a different color, so you can actually see how it's a blueprint on top of a blueprint. Some lines are also reference lines, and some lines are the physical structure itself. And it's very, very in your face, straightforward. This one kind of looks like a mess, but like I said, that's because it's blueprints on top of blueprints. And it isn't just the Giza Plateau. It is other structures, and I don't know exactly what other structures, because I don't know the configuration of many of the other monolithic structures that are on the surface of the planet, the Earth. I keep saying planet by mistake. I don't know all of the places, but if people would focus on these particular lines, we can probably figure out what other structures are documented in the Nazca lines, which will show that all of these structures were built around the same time period. Otherwise, they wouldn't all be documented together. They may work in concert, or they all may have like functions and just be located on different places on the surface of the Earth. But it's hard to get people to aid me with this, and it's more work than I can really bite off and chew on my own, unless I had nothing else to do with my life. If I was retired and had nothing else to do. But it's all there. It's and it's hard for people to actually accept it. I understand you can accept it because I've been working with you for so long that I've showed you piece by piece by piece to build up to it. But if I just started, 5 years ago and said, hey, the blueprints for the Giza Plateau are on the thing, and here's what it is, and here's what it does, without showing you all the, how static works and how a Van de Graaff generator works and what heavy water is and all this other stuff, you couldn't understand the system because you don't have the back knowledge to understand the system. And it just seems so out of left field. You know what I mean? Especially when you've been brought up and believe that the Giza pyramid is a tomb. And it's hard to believe when somebody turns around and says, hey, it's way more than a tomb. It's not only way more than a tomb, but it's documented on the okay, we can stop. Like I said, I could talk to you forever because there's still more. There's still more I can enlighten you to. Hi, noisy. Hi, noisy. Hi, noisy. He's like, I want to play ball. All right. Well, you have a great day. Thank you for your time. I hope you can string that together so it makes sense and works out well. I'll be glad to. Maybe I can try again when I can send the dog out for a walk. I'll send the doggy daycare. Sure. Yeah. Talk to you. I'll still talk to you. Go ahead and say goodbye, and we can say bye. And the dog's name is Peanut because he's a little peanut-looking dog. Where did he go? He's a little. I got the camera going wrong. He's a little tiny peanut. He's a mix between a wiener dog and a Chihuahua. So he's a Chiweenie. No problem. I'm just hoping somebody with an open mind can look at it and can lend me aid. I don't even care if somebody else takes the reins and runs with it and takes my work. I just care that people stop believing a lie. That's what I care. Goodbye. Have a good day. Stay flat.
Well, I hope you really enjoyed that hangout with another look at these pyramids, and thank you very much to Angel. Unfortunately, we were doing it on Facebook and my computer won't do narration and the computer, and we'd rather have listened to Angel. So thanks very much for all Angel's hard work and his dream to see this whole thing working. But anyway, thanks very much for this brilliant chat, and hopefully it's enlightened you a bit more. Thank you, Angel. Thank you, chat room. Mwah.